will start. Nice to see people joining. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy, and yes, thumbs up if you're staying safe and healthy. Okay, great. Yeah, I think this will be a great opportunity to learn from each other. And Megan has already sent out the new WIDA standards on our distribution list. And we'll talk more about support. There's an online course that I'm redesigning, and I've kind of waited for this. So Megan might join me as a kind of co-presenter on the course. You know, so we're kind of thinking about ways to support the work up to the new standards. And I'll wait for, you know, right until 9 o'clock. I know some people, and there's a few people, well, actually one, Michelle Eldridge, who's in another meeting. So she'll come on and talk about the summer school program that they have used to mitigate, you know, kind of the learning gaps. And because we have COVID, obviously there's going to be way more. So she has a pretty interesting model. And Provo actually only has one school in TSI, elementary school in TSI. Of course, secondary is always another story. But we're going to hear some really great examples of work being done in middle schools. And previously, you know, we had some high schools that really focused on closing the opportunity gap, you know, which is really a rare skill and just a rare thing in general, where we have a commitment for equitable opportunities to, you know, early college coursework at the high school. So we've done those recognitions intentionally to show specific models and approaches that are in Utah. You know, not in California, not in Massachusetts. There's nothing wrong with those states. I have lots of friends there. But I think it really helps to look at the work that we're doing in our state. I mean, we have plenty of great educators, district personnel, principals, teachers. I think you actually saw that our Utah teacher is one of the finalists for the, you know, Teacher of the Year for the nation. So, you know, we actually have a lot to be proud of, and we shouldn't be, you know, all self-deprecating and overly anxious, even though this is kind of an anxiety-producing time. Okay. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock. And I'm just going to overview the agenda. I sent it out to you. There's a really interesting legislation. We all have been working with Olivia Whiteley, who's the Western States Advocacy Officer for the International Rescue Committee. I made a mistake on the agenda and put refugee because I was thinking refugees. This is an organization that has a really, I'm sure Olivia could tell you more, but it's one of my favorites because it goes back to, you know, the 1890s and America's age of imperialism. So it's a pretty impressive agency. And then we'll have the bulk of our time with recognition schools, middle schools, and I actually left it up to 3 specific districts to decide how they wanted to present or what they wanted to do. And so in those represented, those ALS directors and districts will be Salt Lake, Ogden, and Granite, and it won't be in any specific order, but I'll actually talk about the criteria before each of those districts speak. And then we'll hand it over to, I think Ogden has slides, so what we'll do is we'll end with Ogden, but we'll start with Granite and Salt Lake, if that's okay with Charlene and Peggy.
Granite also has slides.
Okay, then we'll start with Salt Lake. I don't know if Salt Lake has slides. Maybe they just, last time when we had a panel, we just had a conference. So why don't we do that? So we'll start with Salt Lake, and then we'll have Granite and Ogden. Whenever Michelle Eldridge pops in, we'll have the approach that they're using to mitigate the COVID impact on lost learning through summer school. We'll have Megan and Michelle, I don't know which one or if it's going to be both. They'll be talking about the new WIDA standards and professional development opportunities offered by WIDA, which I would really hope that you would disseminate widely for teachers. And then we'll have the new.
Because yours was playing, but.
Okay, someone's not muted, so make sure that you're unmuted. I think it might be Granite or somebody who's not muted. Okay, so then the new president for Access, which is the multicultural committee that is actually is the advisory to the board, and Claustina Mahon Reynolds. We'll just mention briefly the work that they've done in helping the board pass the anti-racism resolution. And then the last thing, I'm not going to say anything about it, but I have a second draft of a standard operating procedure for complaints. You might be surprised that and this is not an intention to be a downer or anything, but I get several complaints from our internal audit department in relationship to LEAs across the state who are violating issues related to multilingual learners. The term multilingual learners we're moving to, even though federal agencies still have English learner as the criteria as far as the language. ELL has gone the way of the dinosaur because English language learner is fairly redundant. If it's English and it's a language, then it's actually the same thing. So English learner in ESSA is, and other states have done amazing work, especially with First Peoples and Indigenous languages, and have moved as well as our own assessment department to multilingual learners. I have a seminar with students from the Utah International School, and they're learning English, but they actually know 3 or 4 languages. So it's not like we categorize people as, English learners because that's the only language they have. It's kind of not focusing on assets and assuming some kind of normalization related to, everybody's okay when they speak English. Well, there are lots of people who speak many more languages. Okay, so I see Olivia on. And Olivia, do you want to give us a brief overview of the legislation for us? And it's really nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. So I'm just going to share my screen. I have some slides, but I think today it'd be better if I reviewed just the actual text, since you all are kind of the technical experts and practitioners. And I see a couple friendly faces on this call that have helped provide input on some of these. legislative changes. So thank you to all that have, and to all who haven't yet. We welcome sort of any of your feedback or notes on some of these pieces. So like Christelle mentioned, I am the Western States Advocacy Officer for the International Rescue Committee in Salt Lake City. We're one of Utah's 2 refugee resettlement agencies and have a lot of interaction with you all as we're enrolling our refugee students into schools and assisting them with acclimating and reaching academic success. And we've identified a couple of areas in state code that we're hoping to amend in order to make that transition a little bit easier for our refugee and newcomer students. So there are a couple of recommendations. The first has to do with age documentation. Some of our refugee students come to the US with inaccurate dates listed on their birth certificates or other forms of documentation. And this happens for several reasons. It can be differences in the way that cultures document birth dates. It can be due to documenting errors that happen throughout the refugee resettlement process when you have people translating across different languages. It can happen due to refugee camps where if students are older, they get a higher allotment of food. There's several reasons. And the piece of code that we're amending you see in front of you, state code at the moment, provides a remedial procedure for students that do not have birth certificates. And in that case, existing state code allows a family to just submit an affidavit that says, here is why I do not have a birth certificate, here is the student's age. And what we've done in the green is that we've added a remedial procedure for if the birth date is inaccurate. And it follows the same type of process where it requires a family to submit an affidavit. And then it also requires a family to submit an accompanying document to establish the student's biological age. And you can see that list right here, and it's drawn from the Department of Education's recommendations on ed equity in school enrollment. And then there's a final provision in this section that states that if no documentation that corroborates the affidavit is available, then the school should get together with a little team of the family and the teachers and a counselor or a nurse, whoever's been involved, and have a discussion about where to best place the student to overcome some of those documentation barriers. You'll also see that this particular piece of code originally required an administrator to go to the local police department and report a family that had not submitted documentation within 10 days. We've just amended that to say, if there are concerns, you should meet with the family before meeting with law enforcement, and you can see that in the green below. Our second recommendation has to do with immunization. All of our refugee students receive a comprehensive set of immunizations before, or immunizations when enrolling in public school. It just sometimes takes them a little bit longer because of transportation barriers, or they're new to the US and navigating the US medical system for the first time. Lots of reasons. And so we have a couple of revisions in this section. The first is in existing statute, everyone is allowed 21 days from the period of enrollment to receive their immunizations, except military students who get 30 days. And I've talked to some administrators who think that it's 30 days for everyone. So we're just standardizing that language, 30 days, easy to remember, everyone's the same. And then we've also made a change in this section that requires schools to notify families of immunization deficiencies in their preferred language. So a family receives a notice and is able to understand what the notice is referring to. And then the final revision we've made in regards to immunizations is existing code allows an administrator to grant a student an extension of this immunization timeline. We just clarify in code that being a newcomer or a refugee makes someone eligible for that type of extension and gives the administrator some clarity that granting that, yes, is appropriate in accordance with state code. The next recommendation that we've made, and this actually comes from some of our local administrators, is to have a statewide repository for newcomer transcripts so that different districts that are receiving refugee students from similar backgrounds or similar camps, or even if they are not refugee students, but just international students arriving to participate in the Utah public school system, administrators will have a chance to see how other administrators are interpreting those transcripts. So So even, for example, I don't know if any of you know what Kinyarwanda looks like. I wouldn't know how to identify that language if I saw it for the first time, but if another administrator had already done that work, it might make it a little bit easier to go through that step. And this has a couple of provisions related to student data and privacy that we've actually run by USPE's chief privacy officer. So no concerns sort of in that front. And then the final recommendation that we have for the upcoming year has to do with multilingual and multicultural family engagement. So Utah State Code requires all local school boards to have a parental participation policy. We've changed that language to reflect the language that is being used by practitioners to be family engagement, and also require districts to specifically include multicultural and multilingual families in those policies, because we know that in order to help our multilingual learners, engaging their families is a very critical component of that point. So that's just a little bit of an overview of what sort of changes we're hoping for this particular year. I will say we're hoping to do some work on terms of administrative rules on language access policies. So things like, how do teachers know how to access interpretive services? Are there some contracting issues that are delaying teachers' access to some of these services for students? And continuing this work on engaging multilingual and multicultural families. I'll pop my email into the chat in case anyone has feedback or wants to talk about these further. We do have a little wiggle room to make some revisions if there are things you want to flag, and also happy to answer any questions people might have at this time.
Olivia, we just have one question, and it says, it's from Brady. He says, would changing their birth date within the school system make it difficult to match refugees to state and federal records?
Yeah, so I'll say these two processes are somewhat distinct. In terms of the piece of code we're amending, it only has to do with public school enrollment. Their birth date on other federal and state records will still continue to match whatever the official documentation is. And in order to amend that, really a refugee family would need to consult with an immigration lawyer just to make sure it doesn't complicate any of their resettlement procedures. So those two things would be two separate processes, and we're only addressing the public school enrollment piece in this particular change.
So let me add something to the work that Olivia's done and lots of people on this. We continually have these strange suspicions about refugees in relationship to birth date and placement. And I have no idea why we should actually be suspicious of people who have suffered. Frankly, I mean, I don't really get that. But I think this legislation will really support the way in which refugee students are enrolled and welcomed into Utah's schooling system. It's been pretty clear from our history, well, not me, I'm a California kid, but from Utah, you know, that welcoming refugees is kind of one of the things that makes us a hallmark in the country. So I just want to thank Olivia and say that we really appreciate the work. I've gotten to know her very well. So it's very, very exciting. Tracy is sending out, she says, considering adding a section to 1A1 to discourage placing students in grades below their possible age when there is no birth records. Often families and their advocates want kids to have lower grade thinking that will help them. However, it doesn't work well when students get older and puberty and other factors begin to weigh in. So that's one perspective, which I appreciate. The other one is better understanding the way in which refugees learn and the impact of poverty on the ability to read. So I think we have to be really careful in relationship to the way in which communities working with families, right, not in opposition to families, really determine, you know, as professionals, the best thing to really support equitable access for every single individual student, whether it's a refugee student or a multilingual student or a student living in poverty. So that's kind of my my approach. Okay, so Olivia, we're gonna move on. Olivia's put her email in there, and she's really open to looking at other approaches, especially with this legislation. So Olivia, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for the history of the IRC, because I know you have to run and probably do other policy issues. The legislative session is kind of driving us all crazy, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Olivia. Okay, so the recognition schools for middle schools. And again, remember the reason we created the recognitions, besides the fact, of a kind of a pandemic depressing environment. Besides that, the goal is really to look at the way in which economically disadvantaged families have increased support from the educational system to ensure that they're not only making progress toward learning another language, but becoming literate in a way so that they have equitable access to early college coursework, careers, and opportunities. So Salt Lake is going to, so Peggy, where are you?
I'm right here, Christelle.
Okay, so I'm just going to say the criteria for the school that was recognized in Salt Lake. So the criteria for Salt Lake, and this is for middle schools. And I see Greg on, so I don't know if Greg is going to talk about East, but that would be really cool too. So criteria for exemplary in middle schools is the enrollment has to be above 600 or more, 50% or more economically disadvantaged. Now, if you've ever taught in middle schools, I think you will understand the implications of this, like big time. 33% of those students are learning English, and their yearly annual growth is above 33%. So the goal really is that each individual student, there's a focus on their making their annual growth goal toward being proficient, because we know that equitable access oftentimes is determined by that criteria. So Peggy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, Chris.
Peggy, I can't hear.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Thanks so much, Christelle. I'm having a little bit of trouble with two of them getting in. I forwarded them the email. Greg has gotten in from East, so would it be okay if we started with Greg, and I will keep working with these two to get them in? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So the middle school is, which is really interesting, is Glendale Middle School, and their actual proficiency rate for kids becoming proficient, where no other middle school has reached this, is actually 5%. So that means 5% of those students who are in middle school. The high school data is really interesting. East High School has, I have the data here somewhere, but yeah, so East High School is an exemplary high school. Their enrollment is almost 2,000. Economically disadvantaged is 59%. They have 16% ELs. 39% of the students have actually achieved their annual growth goal. And this is in a high school. The advanced coursework that students have achieved is 73% in comparison to English only of 86%, which means of all the high schools in the entire state with this in this category, they have closed the opportunity gap by 13%. Now, I don't know if you understand how like significant that is. That's pretty significant. So Greg, do you want to just say some things to us? I could also, I know East very well. You weren't there, Greg, but I worked with you all 20 years ago. And I know many of the teachers there. So Greg, do you want to take it away?
Sure. I'm not sure what exactly people are interested in hearing, but first off, I want to start just by saying how excited and how proud we are of our students and their desire and willingness to engage and participate and be part of the school, and the school to be part of their lives. We have a lot going on at East. As some of you may know, our goal is to have every student and every family connected to the school, and the school connected to their home. And so we do a lot of home visits. We provide a lot of supports in the summertime. We have teachers that are doing extension learning opportunities in the summer for our English learners. And we've really focused as a school on increasing access and opportunity for all students, but especially for students of minoritized groups. I mean, I feel like I could go on all day and still only capture, a fraction of what our students and our teachers are doing. I have what I would say is the best faculty and staff in the state, and I think that helps with our results. Some of the supports that we have for our students, other than home visits and that, we've got groups of students that are engaging in a process of becoming interpreters that then we're able to use at other schools in our school district. Not only does that engage the students in their language acquisition, it engages them in their school, it engages them in their community, and in the feeder schools, and it also gives them a sellable skill to make money while they're in school, and I guarantee you every teenager in high school wants to make money. We about a year ago, I have a master teacher when it comes to planning, instruction, assessing, and supporting English learners. And half of her contract is dedicated to coaching our other teachers in the building. And they work in cohorts. So she works with about 8 teachers at any given time over the course of several weeks, where they're planning together, observing, providing feedback. And that's had a lot of impact for those teachers that have been involved. We try to connect with neighborhood partners, IRC, UNP, try to have a lot of family school partnerships going. One really big effort that we're doing at East High is we're detracking. This year, our 9th grade language arts classes and 9th grade social studies classes are detracked, so we don't have regular honors. All of the students in 9th grade are taking the same class, and so they're true heterogeneously grouped classes, and teachers have been supported with a lot of professional learning in differentiation and scaffolding and helping support students. Like I said, I could keep going on, Christelle, for a long time. I'm really excited. I will tell you, we're also celebrating. We had basically an 11.5% increase in the passing rates of AP exams this last year, and that's largely due to we've had an increase in students from minoritized groups taking AP exams and or taking the classes and taking the exams, and they're passing. And that's what we would expect. We would expect nothing less. So it's expectations, support, and just, it's really, I think, trying to build that community so that it doesn't feel like school is something else.
So let me just say, East High was, and this is Rebecca Richardson. They have a pre-AP class similar to the experience of Park City that has the summer school pre-AP work so that kids feel more comfortable going into AP classes and meeting those challenges. They also they took the Cottonwood approach to the youth translator, and they adapted it to a Stanford design thinking model and worked with the Lausanne Institute to create a plan for creating a small business with about 14 or 15 students who are multilingual learners. And they took part in the assessment capable learning cohort work.
Mm-hmm.
And that had a huge impact on the kind of instruction and the kind of coaching that actually is going on at East. So if you were to think about three major things, that would be one of the major things in high schools to do. I think it was 20 years ago, the science department asked me to come and work with them to make sure that every single ninth grader could have biology instead of, putting quote unquote those kids in earth science. And that has made a huge difference as well. They, along with Hillcrest, ensure that biology is accessible and available for every single student, which then ends up being, a college credit course on their transcript. So, Greg, I'm a big fan of East, always have been for the last 20 years. So
I'll tell you, some exciting stuff's going on. Every one of our ninth graders takes AP Human Geography, and the College Board has AP Human Geography can be a semester class. We teach it over a full year, which helps provide support for all students and prepares all students better for the rigors of the AP courses that are to come. And we're excited. So not only are our ninth grade English classes and social studies class detracked, next year we'll have detracked secondary math 1, and we'll have we're working on pre-AP biology. So all of the ninth grade core classes will be detracked next year, and we'll have 10th grade language arts and 10th grade math, so secondary math 2 will be detracked next year. And I just want to say what an amazing faculty and staff I have. We're doing this all during the pandemic. We're still continuing to increase the model of detracking and providing equity and access for all students.
Thanks, Greg. So I hope people are taking lots of notes for your high schools. This piece is really important. I used to be a high school teacher, and so sometimes they're quite challenging. I don't actually know why. Well, I do have some reasons, but I'm not going to say them. So thanks, Greg. And I'm going to turn it over to Peggy. And as soon as the pandemic is over and I'm vaccinated, you're going to see me at your door, Greg. Okay, Peggy, did you get other people in, or?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. So thanks so much, Christelle and Greg, for all the great work that you're doing at East. I really do believe one of the big linchpins in East's work with all of their students has been that assessment capable learners. It's amazing to go into those rooms and ask kids, what are you learning? Why are you learning it? And how will you know if you've learned it? They've really focused on teacher clarity, and I think just hats off to having it such a school-wide initiative that all teachers are providing that, that clarity for kids. So thanks so much. We have Jared Wright. He's been able to get in. I apologize for some of the troubles, but Jared, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, hello. Sorry.
Okay, great. Take it away, Jared.
Well, I just want to say hello. Good morning. My name's Jared Wright. I've been the principal of West since July 1st, so I really can take no credit, and honestly don't know completely everything that led to some of the successes we're having, but I do have, as I've learned and come in, I've been able to witness quite a few of the things that West has done to support our MLL learners as they come through the West High experience that we have here. I'll just have to disagree with Greg. Actually, I'll want Greg Mon on one thing. I think he has the second best faculty in the world because it's second only to West High's faculty.
Okay, West, Greg. So Jared, let me before you go on, we need to stop that. That's one thing. And then the second thing is, I'll just establish the criteria by which your school was awarded an excellence award and Greg's was exemplary. Yeah. So just stop for a minute.
Okay. Christelle, I'm with you. I'm with you there. Okay. That's all I need to say.
Okay, so let me tell you the criteria for excellence.
Yeah.
So it's enrollment 800 and above, and which West is very high at 2850. 25 to 50% economically disadvantaged, 10 to 15% ELs, which West has 14%, 25 to 45% making annual growth. West has 30% making, and 30 to 50% achieving advanced coursework. Now, advanced coursework for West is 75%. So again, the reason they were actually awarded the recognition was because they're closing the opportunity gap. So Jared, we're just going to stick on that and just make your words short.
Okay, I like that. Thanks, Christelle. No, so some things that are contributing to this is the individualization of students' access to the tier 1 instruction that they need, as well as our programming. So, for example, with our MLL students, actually are specifically they have a very clear oversight of a counselor and our ALS coordinator to make sure that they're placed properly, meaning that they're getting access to the best teachers and with the greatest tier 1 support. In addition to that, the type of programming that we have here through our AVID program, and as that is expanding and started to work with our IB program here, where our students and our AP program, where we're creating some bridge classes where they can actually have access to those more advanced coursework. I think actually a key to this too, in not only having the students get access to those advanced courses, but the type of social and emotional support they get here. I mean, it's the same thing what Greg has alluded to. We make sure that the students' needs, that their well-being needs are being made as best we can by the school. So when they come to school, it's a place where they're safe. They feel that they're being supported. And then when we're asking them to take risks for taking some, in this case, some more challenging classes, that they have that emotional support behind them. And then with advocates, student advocates, they have through a buddy system that we have in place, but particularly with our ALS coordinators and their assigned counselors that do regular check-ins with them along with their teachers. And one thing they have started doing here, as I'm learning, is actually creating a success plan for our MLL students. Not too dissimilar from an IEP, but they're actually establishing learning goals for the students that they want to have outcomes. And that's kind of in conjunction with their SCP, the CCRs, but actually setting regular learning goals for each student as they go through the process here. So we have a lot to work on and to improve on, but we're excited about what's happening here. And I'm excited to learn more about what's going on here because this is new to me too. I don't even know half my staff. I haven't met them yet, so.
Thanks, Jared. We really appreciate that a lot. So we have about 10 more minutes for Salt Lake. So do you have your middle school people on?
We do, Christelle. And I do have a couple of questions in the chat. If we have a second for that, I'm noting them, so don't think that I'm forgetting about you. And we have Jill Bailey here. So Jill, Christelle, did you want to start with what the criteria was for middle school?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I said that a little bit before, but Glendale has an enrollment of over 800 students. Their economically disadvantaged percentage is 92%. The percent of ELs in their school is 34. Their annual growth, believe it or not, is 37%. So 37% of the students that they actually have are reaching their annual growth goal. So Glendale, generally has done, and not to mention that they're one of the few middle schools in the entire state who actually gets their students to proficiency, which is a 5.0 on WIDA, which is incredibly challenging at the middle school. So Peggy, do you want to introduce Glendale?
Yes, thank you so much. So Jill Bailey is here to represent Glendale, and I think Christelle gave you the facts of what they're up against and how well they going into that school is amazing to see the culture of acceptance there. So Jill, are you ready to talk? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I am here. So we are really proud of the work that we've been doing the past 4 years. I've been, this is my 4th year, and we had an incredible year last year, of course, until the pandemic, and it was a mic drop. We lost 30% of our kids, which we still mourn that. They're all back, so the majority of them are back, and we're working hard with them. But I think the things that worked really well for us, and I'll start with whole school. We are also, we are sold on the learning intentions and success criteria. We use that school-wide, and that gives our multi-language learners a clear focus on what is going to happen in the class and what they need to do to be successful. So that's firstly. Secondly, we implemented a school-wide reading program, not reading program, it was just more of a strategy. We use dyad reading in the entire school. So 20 minutes a day, kids are partner reading using the dyad strategy. And thirdly, whole school, we are sold on scaffolded writing instruction using the same graphic organizer so the kids know how to organize their writing across all curriculums. And then for intervention, we really looked at every single kid's reading or WIDA scores and then pointed them to the correct class. And then our focus was either reading or writing to boost those scores. And we're really successful with that. We were able to give each of our ELD kids what they needed in regards to what they were lacking on their WIDA scores. So those are the things that we did, whole school and intervention. And we're trying to do it this year, but as you know, we're remote, so it's been hard. But we'll pick up when the kids are back in the building using those same strategies. We're trying to do them online with pretty good success. So that's it. We are a very cohesive staff with an awesome climate. We feel that collective efficacy, and that's been also very helpful. We have the same mission.
So Jill, let me just say it's really nice to meet you. I haven't met you. I've met many of the other people in Salt Lake and across the state. So, welcome. And I'll just say something before Peggy goes. She has, a little bit more time. Greg is going to send us some stuff, and then I'll send it out to everybody. Greg, in the email, people are interested in finding out information that you can provide, and I'll coordinate with Peggy so you can provide that. Same thing with Jill. I think dyad reading, I've seen it happen in relationship to language acquisition and literacy, which is a hard sell to many people. They don't really understand that relationship, if you know what I mean. So I just want to thank you. And Peggy, do we have someone else from Salt Lake before we switch?
No, that's the representation from Salt Lake. And so anyone that had a question in the chat, I've written them down, and we'll make sure that in that email you get the answers to those. So thanks so much, Christelle, for the opportunity to showcase some of the great work that's happening in the schools.
Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Jill, Jared, and Greg. And just to be clear, Glendale is a feeder of East.
Yeah.
And for a long time, there was like this disconnect. And so it's obvious that's not happening anymore. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to look more closely at this relationship between transition from elementary to middle, where English learners and multilingual learners usually crash and die. But that's not happening at Glendale. So, and their transition from middle school to high school, which is also, a challenge. So I just want to thank you for being really exemplary in relationship to that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, how about Granite? Charlene?
I'm here, Christelle. Thank you. We're really excited this morning to be able to present. Christelle, we've chosen to do a little different kind of a route here. We had several people, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on for the success in the schools and everything. And so we've asked 3 schools to present: an elementary, a junior high, and a high school. And then what we are also going to be doing is we've recorded several of these sections because for the time, trying to get everybody here at the same time. I also have, we have a presentation, a slide presentation, some recordings, and I've got Nathan Moore, one of our teacher specialists, helping get our slideshow up. So do we have the share?
I think it's paused.
So let me, before we start, Charlene, because that's a great way to put everything together for us. And the reason I'm saying that is, we have to keep sending Martin Bates, who's the superintendent and a very, dear friend. And I really admire his work. Granite generally has always had the most high schools, the most middle schools, high elementary schools in recognition for their consistent work across the district with multilingual learners. So Charlene, thank you so much for putting this all together in a way so we can actually get a better idea of what really systemic practices look like in a district. So I really appreciate that, Charlene.
Thank you, thank you. This was quite the quite the project to do. So there we go. Are you all seeing the screen then? Christelle, do you want to just give a thumbs up? Perfect.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Nathan, did you make sure the sound was available for everything?
It should be.
Okay. All right. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. Basically, Christelle has shared with you the parameters for recognition. And so the 3 schools, just as a preview, the 3 schools that we're going to look at are Stansbury Elementary, which is a school of excellence for our elementary schools. Granger High School, that's a exemplary model for the high schools. And our junior high is Granite Park Junior High School, exemplary model as well. So we'll go ahead and begin. I just want to give you a overview of Granite School District as far as what we look like. Oh, I'll press that. This year, our enrollment is down a little at 61,851. We are considered a majority minority school district with 51% students of color, 106 languages, and you can see our breakdown for 61 elementary schools, 15 junior highs, and 8 high schools. And just like the rest of the districts, we have numerous specialty schools and programs. To the right on this slide, it's really quite interesting. Just wanted to share with you our float students, or the breakdown of our multilingual learners. So as far as our multilingual learners go, we have 24% are being served from levels 1 through 4. 2% recently exited, and 9% exited. So when you break all of that down or look at it, I like to look at it in terms of 1 out of every 4 students is considered, has been or received English language or has been a multilingual learner at some point in time. And then currently 1 out of every 3 students in our classrooms is receiving services. So just to give you an idea or a background, if I got the numbers incorrect, I'm sure some of my dearest friends will correct me on that. So we'll go on to the next slide, a short little agenda as to, you'll see the school presentations in the order of elementary, junior high, and high school. One of the critical pieces is this year we have a new director of assessment, Dr. Joan Bramble, who came out of the elementary school at Farnsworth Elementary, and she's done some phenomenal work this year with actually identifying each student and their projected annual growth goal. And you'll see how that's been very instrumental. What we're going to do also is to share with you some specific strategies that have been most effective in the schools or what the schools are asking for, so that they can then in turn implement the strategies behind what they're doing with their multilingual learners. So you can see the WIDA Access 2.0. Proficiency-based learning is a new initiative. It's not new, we've been working on it for many years, but by next year, all high schools should be implementing that. Nathan, if I'm speaking incorrectly, you'll add something. So we've been working on it, and we'll show how the multilingual learners fits into that. Secondary, because we've had several people ask, what do we do in secondary? We're showing a little bit of that. And of course, we cannot do any of this without the engagement of families. And then we're trying to keep close to the time. That's why it's recorded as well. We hope that there's still some time for questions, Q&A. So you're not going to hear my voice for a while. We're hoping that technology works well and that you will be able to hear the recordings and see the visuals that have been presented for you. So we're going to go ahead. Thank you, Nathan.
Now we are pleased to hear from Stansbury Elementary School. Stansbury was recognized for exemplary ELD growth.
Hi, this is David Gomez from Stansbury Elementary. I'm the principal here, and we have Melanie Roybal, the assistant principal of our school. This is my second year here, Melanie's first year this year. And we decided when we came here to Stansbury, which is a very large Title I school, we have a lot of multilingual learners in our school, which means we do have to do a lot of the WIDA testing, access testing. So we decided we needed to go back to basics on many things. The first thing that we did with our school was we introduced and taught the team learning process, as you see on the screen there. It's the basic 4 questions to a PLC. But I like this team learning process because it clarifies what you should be doing underneath each question. And last year, we really hammered this concept into our staff. We trained them. We brought it to team meetings, PLC meetings. Every meeting we went to, we went over it. And this became our learning process, our map as we went through this reforming stage at Stansbury Elementary. We then looked at needing to reform our PLCs. Again, nothing new. We just went back to basics. We turned the PLCs more into a data-driven PLC. I and the assistant principal were always at every meeting. We ran it. Our coaches were there. They were running this team learning process, asking these questions, and it really helped us to understand what grade levels needed help, what grade levels did not need help. We then looked at our multiple funding sources, Title I, Title III, TSSA, Land Trust, and we needed to restructure the usage of that. One of the uses was we needed to take a look at how we were using our aids and structure the aids time so that they were working specifically with kids on interventions. And that became huge for us because we also needed to cut our aids. And so we restructured them to make sure that they were basically doing tier 1 and tier 2 interventions with students that we had identified through our PLC data-driven process.
As Mr. Gomez said, I am the assistant principal. This year is my first year at Stansbury, and I am also our ALP lead teacher. Being the ALP lead teacher, we're really looking at building our ELD program. Teachers are really valuing the importance of ELD time and taking ownership this year. Our teachers have asked for more professional development and understanding of WIDA, and they have taken ownership in administering the WIDA access test this year. So every SNAD day, we incorporate something related to WIDA in our professional development, and teachers have run with it. And really, we are looking at building the capacity of all teachers, coaches, and administration so that we're working together to meet the needs of our multilingual learners.
Again, very simple, going back to basics. It's nothing new, but they work, and we know they're going to work, and we're going to continue doing this for the next 3 to 5 years, hopefully. And it's a great start to where I think lots of schools need to be.
Our next presenter will be Aaron Wilson. Aaron was the principal of Granite Park Junior High School last year. Granite Park has been recognized by USBE for having exemplary English proficiency growth.
At Granite Park Junior High School, it was a team effort in making sure that our multilingual learners were successful in meeting their individual growth targets. I'll mention a few of those. First is when we would hire teachers, we would, in our interview question, pose the scenario of how they're going to work with students with various language abilities in one class. And in our rubric awarded points that lent to hiring that individual if they spoke to with experience or an aptitude to embed these SIOP strategies into their classroom. And if a candidate spoke of English language learners or students of diversity through a negative or deficit lens, that usually worked against them to get the job. Training our teachers in culturally relevant teaching practices and sending them to professional development and sharing that with the staff. And making sure that when we develop our master schedule, which by the way includes for each core content area, math, English, science, and history, a level 1 and a level 2 class for each grade level so that they can receive appropriate instruction, and making sure that before we place any other tiles developing our master schedule, we first put these classes on there and then compare conflicts against the English language learner classes and special education classes so that students could receive all their services without conflict and the electives that they like. We were a national demonstration school for AVID, which when it boils down to it, made sure that effective tier 1 strategies were utilized in each classroom so that we just didn't plow through content, but rather what we did is we made sure that there were really important scaffolds in place so that students could understand how to be effective writers, so that they had important reading strategies to scaffold them so they could improve reading. And we made sure that in our professional development that teachers understood and knew it was important to incorporate SIOP strategies into Tier 1 instruction, because when we incorporate sheltered content instruction for all students, that helps all students, but especially for multilingual students for whom it's designed. A brief experience I'll share is we had 2 teachers give a 5-minute lesson in faculty meeting in different languages unfamiliar to most teachers. And one used no SIOP strategies. It was direct instruction, and teachers recalled how frustrating that was to try to learn anything. The second teacher gave the same lesson in a different language, but used strategies that helped us dual decode and have inferences to know what was being taught. And that exercise, we built off of that because it really helped teachers understand the need for sheltered content instruction during Tier 1 instruction. And so those are some things that I'd mentioned. It's a team effort, certainly, but making sure you have the right people in place, the right systems in place. You don't view multilingual learner instruction as a program, but rather a system to which all have access. I'd attribute some of that to our success.
Our next presenters are from Granger High School. Granger was named an exemplary school by USBE for English language development growth. Dr. David Dunn is the principal, and Summers Kimple is the ALP lead teacher.
So one of the things about Granger that makes it really unique is we actually have 900 multi-language learners. And that is varying, usually a little bit higher actually.
Part of our culture, We believe that as a school it is so critical for us to set expectations and be able to support our students. We believe in creating a culture where students feel comfortable and want to be here, but also have the desire to improve their academics and have a desire to set goals and meet those expectations.
All of the teachers have PSYOP down. I mean, we do the visuals, we do the background knowledge, realia is brought into the classroom very frequently. We have a lot of TPR hands-on stuff. There's a lot of realia. When we do assessments, we try and tier them so it's not always multiple choice or open-ended questions. We do a lot of the quick formative checks with papers, thumbs up, thumbs down, those really basic stuff that PSYOP teaches. That's standard. So if we have a student that has a specific need and we're seeing that they're not learning, I'll meet with the content teacher and we'll go through some strategies that will work well for that teacher. And as we work them into the student's learning, we actually share that with other teachers of that student.
One of the important parts of making sure we're supporting our students is working together as a faculty and being collaborative. We all need to understand what level our students are at and then be able to meet them where they're at.
So something we do here is we have this mentality of you help the one. So I think it's something that makes our school very unique. When we get a new student, the counselor comes out and tells us a little bit about their history in an email. You know, the student is from this country, they've been here this long, if they're a refugee, if they're living here alone, if there's a special circumstance. And that's very common here, is this idea of it's not all the kids, you look at one specific student. Teacher all of a sudden has a way to reach that student and the student's learning better. I would say that's the best, just the collaboration. This school is all about, you know, getting together and helping just that one student.
Now we will hear from Joan Bramble. Joan is the Director of Student Assessment in Granite School District.
The assessment department in Granite School District was looking for ways to be able to help schools in our district look at the performance of the students on the WIDA test in order to look for trends and patterns, to celebrate things that they were doing well with their English language learners and some areas for growth. On this slide, you see some charts that were made to be able to help schools look at this data. The district average scale scores were calculated along with school scores. We looked at individual students and the scale score changes that were made from year to year and calculated averages in order to produce these particular charts. What was quite exciting when this data was pulled was the school level data for Farnsworth Elementary. I had been a principal at this school and we had noted that our speaking scores were really low. So we were looking for some things that we might do to be able to help our English language learners be able to do a better job with that particular area, noting that that was definitely a weakness, and also recognizing that one of the things that the students didn't have a lot of experience or exposure to was the skill of speaking into a microphone on a computer. So in order to look at giving them those skills so that they could best show that on the WIDA test, we embedded experiences each week with Flipgrid, and we were very excited to see that it definitely made a difference as we looked at the performance levels that increased for our students in that particular area. This highlights a way that I think is really powerful in terms of helping schools look at school level data and then use that to be able to see ways in which they might best support their language learners. There's another report that we were able to produce out of the assessment department. This is a student report that we had some requests for in order for principals to be able to have some meaningful goal setting conferences with their English language learners as they were preparing to take their WIDA test again. We looked into how the progress target score is calculated at the state level in order to be able to establish a goal for each student. And we also wanted to be able to share with them some of their history on their subscores to, again, celebrate the strengths and also look for areas of potential growth that the individual student may need to be aware of. These are a powerful tool as individual principals or teachers can sit down with students and really take a look at the progress that individual students are making, as well as have a meaningful conversation about the goal that is a reasonable goal for that student as they prepare to take their WIDA test. These have received a lot of great feedback from schools as they have used these to help their students see the growth that they've made and then also look toward what they hope to do on the WIDA test when they take it this year.
Now Lisa Peterson will explain English language development instruction in Granite. Lisa is a teacher specialist in the Department of Educational Equity.
One of the professional development opportunities we present to schools is regarding English language development instruction. We start with a brief overview of what ELD instruction is and who qualifies for ELD services. Although ELD instruction may look different depending on the school setting and the grade level of the student, all ELD instruction must meet the same requirements. ELD instruction occurs during Tier 1 instruction and is 45 minutes of daily instruction time. ELD instruction is taught by a highly qualified ESL-endorsed teacher, should be driven by ongoing language assessments, and can be taught across all content areas. At the secondary school level, specific courses meeting the ELD instruction requirements are built into the master schedules. A student's current WIDA level determines what ESL courses they are required to take. At the elementary level, the structure of ELD instruction is more flexible given the size and diversity of the schools in our district. ELD instruction is planned and coordinated by grade level with consideration given to many factors, including the number of multilingual learners, the available resources, and the intention of instruction. When working with schools to develop their ELD instruction, we first take a look at the big picture. We analyze each grade level's WIDA access data. Overall WIDA levels, as well as scores for each of the language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing are taken into consideration when determining instructional strengths and areas of focus. We then review several resources that are available and support teachers in writing an action plan for ELD instruction. During this time, we get to interact with the teachers and problem solve any specific grade level needs or concerns. Once the action plans for ELD instruction are completed, copies are shared with the school administration as well as our department so that we as teacher specialists can follow up with additional support and resources as needed.
Now Brooke Holyoke will discuss how we prepare schools and students for the WIDA Access 2.0. Brooke is a teacher specialist in the Department of Educational Equity.
The key role of the teacher specialist is supporting all of our teachers and schools with tools and resources for multilingual learners. The high-stakes test that shows the growth that our multilingual learners are making is the WIDA Access test. As teacher specialists, we go to schools and train teachers on the Access test and how to give it. We start out with describing what the Access test is and then move to describing the structure of the test. For example, this is one of the slides that we show them. This is the structure. We have the 4 categories of listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and we give them approximate time frames for the structure of the test. The next part of the training is to demonstrate what a sample question on the test looks like and sounds like. We explain what the student is supposed to do when presented with the question. For example, parts to listen to, the correct buttons to use, and how the student should mechanically answer the question. We also explain the teacher's role in administering the test. When the teacher knows what to expect, it helps facilitate a calm, positive test experience for the student. After each of the sample questions in the 4 tested areas of listening, reading, speaking, and writing, we then give a detailed bullet point list of how each test works technically. The slide you are viewing on the left shows how the listening test works, and we go over each of these points in the training and answer questions. This slide is followed by a bullet point list of general teaching suggestions that teachers can use with multilingual learners and all learners as well in the same 4 tested areas. At the conclusion of our presentation, we go over simple steps to help students score better. These are just general test-taking strategies that teachers can teach their students throughout the year. After that, we open up for questions, and then we give out all of our information, contact information, so that teachers feel like they have a direct line of support, and that just bridges that relationship for the teacher and for the teacher specialists. Schools that have principal support and teacher buy-in to support and prepare students for taking the Access test have been schools that show positive gains with their multilingual learners. This is a goal-setting sheet that we will see in the video in the next slide at a goal-setting meeting with a student.
We're going to do the WIDA test pretty soon. And I don't know if you remember the WIDA test. We do it every year. Mrs. Stewart brings you into the computer lab and you have to do a speaking part and a listening part and all of that. So I wanted to show you, look, here's your scores for the last 3 years. There's listening, reading, speaking, and writing. And right here, this end one is last year's scores. Look at that, you got a 5.7, you're almost ready to test out. And look at that, you got a 5, so you got, on listening, you got a 5.7, I'm gonna write that down here. On reading, what did you get? 5.2. 5.2, that's rocking it. All right, how about speaking? 3.7. Super good. And your last one? 3.6. 3.6 on writing. Look at how you've gotten better every year. That should make you feel pretty good, right? Now I want to show you this. This is last year's test. Do you know that if you get to 5s, you don't have to take this test anymore? Really? Yeah. So look, right here you got a 4 overall. They added all of these up. Your goal this year is a 4.3. Do you think you can get higher than a 4.3? Yeah. I think you can. I'm going to put 4.3 here so we remember. What do you think you can get on listening? If you got a 5.7, what do you think you can get this next test? You think you can get a 6? I think so. What do you think you can get on speaking? Can you go higher than 3.7? What do you think? I think I could go to 5 or 4. I'm going to put a 4 here, and I'm going to put a 4 plus because you think you're going to go higher than that, right? All right, how about reading? You got a 5.2. I think I'm gonna try to get it to 6 too. You're gonna try to go to 6? Oh, you crazy man. I love that. How about writing? 3.6. That's where you have to write the stories and put all those things in. Okay, so this one's gotta be 4.5. You're gonna go that high? You're a wild man. Okay, I'm very excited. I think you can do it. I'm gonna give you this so you can take it home and remember, because we're gonna start testing next week. And I want to show your family because look, every year you've gotten better. Okay, so this is the beginning. So this is last year when you were in 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade. So technically nothing changed. Well, you are still learning, right? But look, everything went up on all the other ones. Oh. Do you want me to write that here, 1, 2, and 3, so you remember what grade you were in? Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally awesome. This is for you. This is for you. Oh, you don't want a happy birthday. How about that one, aliens? I like it. Yeah. Thank you. All right, good luck. I want you to keep this. And will you please send me...
Hello, my name is Nathan Moore. I work in the Department of Educational Equity, and I will be discussing proficiency-based learning and multilingual learners. Before I explain our thinking about applying PBL to multilingual learners, let me show this video clip to give an overview of the PBL grading process in Granite.
In talking about how we report progress, let's discuss the purpose of grades in the proficiency-based learning model. Grades are meant to show what a student knows and is able to do with respect to classroom content that has been taught. They communicate progress toward proficiency in subject standards and encourage the student to act on feedback and the teacher to adjust and individualize instruction. Grades are not determined by behavior, attendance, or task completion. Behaviors are recorded in the citizenship grade, and extra credit or penalties for late work are not part of Granite's proficiency-based learning model. Students may instead use feedback on previous assessments and learning activities to further demonstrate their proficiency with redos, retakes, or future assessments. Learning activities are meant for practice, and as such are not recorded with scores, so there is no need for late work.
As we started to think about how to address PBL for multilingual learners, we quickly realized that we already had tools for that, the WIDA Can-Do descriptors and the WIDA ELD standards framework. So we developed a set of 4 guiding principles for PBL with multilingual learners. These 4 principles are drawn directly from the WIDA. Focus on what students can do. Expect proficiency in the same core content standards. Vary the complexity and types of language demands, and vary the types and quantity of supports and scaffolds. The following slides are drawn from our presentation that we give to teachers and administrators about PBL for multilingual learners. We discuss the variety of assets that our multilingual learners bring to the classroom. We give teachers a quick overview of how to read their WIDA rosters and interpret scores. In this example, we see that Ashley was high in listening, but she was a level 2 in reading and a level 3 in speaking and writing. On the following slides, we'll show how to use the WIDA Can-Do descriptors to make meaning from these numbers. We give each teacher a blank Can-Do name chart for their grade level and explain that the descriptors are asset-based statements of what students can do with support in English. The descriptors can be used to help differentiate instruction, consider supports and scaffolds for students based on their WIDA scores, and inform proficiency-based learning. We demonstrate how teachers can plot their students' names on the chart for each of the 5 language domains. Then we show how each of the 4 language domains contains sections for the key uses of recount, explain, and argue, while oral language focuses on discussion. Here we have written Ashley's name into the level 2 row of the reading section because she scored a 2.5 in reading. Examining the Can-Do descriptors for her WIDA level in reading, we see that with support, she can locate main ideas in a series of related sentences, identify different types of connectors that show relationships between topics and phenomena, and distinguish language that identifies facts and opinions. If we chart a whole class of students by writing each of their names into the 5 sections of the Can-Do name chart, the chart becomes a powerful tool to facilitate differentiation and instruction. Next, we show teachers how to read the WIDA standards and adapt them for use in their own classrooms. We show them how to crosswalk the Granite proficiency scales with the tools provided by WIDA. We show how each strand of performance indicators relates directly to a state standard. All students are expected to work with the same standard. We show how a strand of performance indicators includes a spectrum of increasingly difficult language demands, and we remind teachers that language demands can and should vary based on the language ability of the students. Next, we show teachers how the WIDA performance indicators provide a variety of different supports and scaffolds. We give teachers a list of suggested scaffolding ideas. We give teachers an opportunity to write a set of proficiency indicators tied to a standard that they will be teaching. And we remind teachers that our objective as teachers is to create the conditions through differentiation and scaffolding that allow all students the opportunity to attain content proficiency regardless of their current WIDA language level. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the importance of going to the WIDA website to download and become familiar with the WIDA Can-Do descriptors and the WIDA standards. WIDA is located at wida.wisc.edu. Now I would like to transition for a moment to discuss RIGOR, which is our curriculum for our secondary ELD classes. RIGOR stands for Reading Instructional Goals for Older Readers. It was developed by Margarita Calderon, an expert in English language acquisition from Johns Hopkins University. Students taking ELD in Granite School District also take ESL English, where the StudySync curriculum is used. We adopted RIGOR because of its core focus on 5 key areas: foundational literacy, academic vocabulary, oral discussion, academic reading, and academic writing. These areas align with our ELD course standards. The RIGOR curriculum is divided into 3 levels, and each level contains 16 units. Units are meant to last for a set of 5 90-minute periods, but our teachers have found that it usually takes a little longer to complete a unit. Each unit is focused on a social studies or science text. Students read, discuss, and write about the topics covered in the texts. On screen, you can see 4 example texts: Human Cells, Fossils, Jamestown, and the Inca World. This is an overview of RIGOR 2-5, The Power of Storms. This unit focuses on weather phenomena. Students read the book, The Power of Storms. Students practice words with the long O sound and the long O sound spellings. Students learn Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 vocabulary. Students read and write sentences with these patterns. For reading and writing, we focus on the skills of summarize and sequence of events. Due to the pandemic, we have been working to create Canvas modules for each of the RIGOR units. On screen, you can see the Power of Storms module. Teachers have been using these modules not only for their distance learners, but also to supplement their in-class instruction. Each module component includes a video clip, which is usually an adaptation of the lesson provided in the RIGOR Teacher's Guide. Now, JD Talbot will discuss Family Engagement Centers. JD is the Associate Director of the Department of Educational Equity.
I'm JD Talbot, the Associate Director of Educational Equity that oversees our Family Engagement Centers. In Granite, we recognize the essential role that families and community play in the education of our students. We base a lot of our work from the research done by Dr. Karen Mapp, and the data is clear that when schools, families, and the community work together to support a child's education, students will earn higher grades and test scores, students enroll in higher level academic programs, students attend school on a more regular basis, students have better social skills and behaviors, and students graduate on time and go on to post-secondary opportunities. In our centers, we do our best to learn from the families' funds of knowledge and recognize their efforts that are already in place to support their children academically. We work with families to align their efforts to academic standards and work with our school district's parent portal. Everything we do in our centers, we want it to be linked to learning. Here's a simplified look at what we do in our family engagement centers. It's intentional that we lead with communication because we feel like good communication leads to positive relationships, and positive relationships help us maximize everything else that we do in our centers. We want everything we do in our centers to ultimately support parents in being able to support their child's academics.
So that concludes our recorded session and presentation. And so what I'm going to do right now is just wrap up. And once again, I want to thank Nathan Moore for putting everything together. And he's here to answer questions as well as Brooke Holyoke and Elisa Peterson, the 3 teacher specialists in our department. So as we wrap up, I wanted to emphasize that we have many other supports that are available, and we've been more than willing to share what we have. There's been some questions. I think Nathan's tried to answer the questions as we've gone along. We will also get Dr. Bramble to share her some of her expertise in what she did in producing those charts. One of the things too that I wanted to make sure, Nathan, can you go forward to the next slide? One of the things I wanted to be able to, before we do questions and answers, and maybe it's not showing, but we do have a page. What we've done as well is surveyed each of our schools that were recognized. And with that survey, we asked them 2 questions. One, what were some of the positive things that you did that produced the effects in 2020 with your scores that brought you the recognition? And so we had them list that. And then we also have asked them another question. So what are you going to do differently? Or what areas can you improve on? And so we're going to have that list available as well that we could share with anyone who would like. But more importantly, we're going to be sharing all that information with our schools in our district, all schools, so that they too can look at and celebrate the great things they've done, and then look forward to other things. So I think we do have probably just a few minutes. That's the reason why we also recorded it, because we know we can talk forever and continue on. So I think, Christelle, go ahead, Christelle.
Yeah, let me just say a couple things because we only have 8 minutes and Ogden will be up next. And then the assessment people, and they have another meeting to go to. But one of the things I want to connect with all of the work that you're doing is this whole idea of collective efficacy and individualized support for the student. The accountability manual is like really clear about the way an individual growth goal is calculated. Judith, who was doing the goal setting with the student, and I've been to Moss, I've been to their school, I know Brooke, I've seen her instruction. You know, the work that they've done is amazing. And consistently, this whole thing about assets instead of deficit thinking, right? And that's what Aaron Wilson said, even in his hiring practices. You know, I would really suggest that the materials that are used, that you're using, that we send out to people, because the issue ends up being the way in which we think and talk about students who are different than us and the families who are different than us determine our behavior, which is really problematic. So my point again is this idea of really focusing on personalized instruction in relationship to what Granite has already done. Grades don't have anything to do with worksheets. I mean, I don't know how I don't know how long it's going to take us to figure this out. This is not about giving kids grades for behavior or attendance, not to mention it's like against the law. You know, so I think your video, Charlene and Nathan, and the examples, and the strands that we've heard, if we think high poverty schools, are detrimental, that's our problem, right? That has nothing to do with the communities that we're serving and we're learning from and with, right? And that's what has been represented. The same way with braiding funds. Can't even tell you the issues related to monitoring federal funds, with people complaining they don't have enough money. Well, that's a serious problem when you return money back to the federal government or you waive funds. So Charlene, I'm going to give you, we have about 4 minutes before Ogden. We want Ogden to kind of set up. And this is all the information of these wonderful people that I know and love. And the strategy in which they use their district personnel to support schools. And someone, I think it was Charlene, who said, we're asking the principals. So, I mean, that's really the point. You're asking the principals and the teachers. When funds are given to, I'm preaching, but the thing that's aggravating to me is when funds are given to districts, and then the districts, the way in which they tell me they're spending it, my comeback is, well, did you actually ask the principals of the schools? Did you ask the teachers? Right? So that's really the point of collective efficacy. Means we're all in this together, right? For every single child and their families, without our judgments about them. So Charlene, I'm going to give you the last word before Ogden sets up. And there have been lots of questions and congratulations and like wonderful things about the work that we've known you've been doing for a very long time. So I'm like totally grateful. Do you want to say anything, Charlene, before we go to Ogden?
Yeah, I just feel like the proud mama right now with the great staff that I have. I've been doing this for multiple years, and it takes everybody. Believe me, I mean, I've learned my lessons along the way. And I have to say kudos to Dr. Estrada and the collective of all the other ALS directors, because we all share ideas together. So once again, yes, I'm so excited on behalf of Granite School District to have 17 of our schools recognized in multiple areas. But once again, it's everybody working together throughout the state, and especially here with a great family in Granite School District. So mahalo nui loa, thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to the rest of this time together. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene, so much. I've seen really great instruction. I went to actually to Aaron's school, which is Granite Park Junior High. Actually saw one of the best classes I've ever seen in my entire life in an AVID program with really diverse learners leading their own seminars. See, that's the point. It's about the students. So Charlene, you're a dear friend, and thank you for all your work and your dedication and your team. Your team is fabulous.
They are. Thank you very much for the recognition. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So JM, we're going to Ogden now. Ogden has done some, really interesting work with Ben Lomond and their other schools, their middle schools. So JM, why don't you tell us, pretty much people get the idea of the criteria. So why don't you just tell us, who's going to be speaking, or, just give us an overview.
Well, that's our plan. We are really excited at Ogden to recognize our 3 secondary sites, Ben Lomond High School, Highland Junior High School, and Mount Fort Junior High School. And I am fortunate enough to have 3 representation from all leadership here. We're going to start with Terry Humphreys, the principal at Highland. She'll pass the baton to Ross Lunsford, the principal at Mount Fort. And then he will pass the baton to the leadership of Ben Lomond, Day Thomas, Smith, the assistant principal, and Steve Pohl, the principal. So without further ado, take it away, Terry. Terry, you're on mute.
There you go. That's much better. You don't have to try to read my lips. I am Terry Humphreys. I'm the principal of Highland Junior High. This is my third year here, and we're very, very excited to share this honor with our other schools here. Certainly don't have a presentation that rises to the level of Granite's presentation. So I hope I don't disappoint. And I'm not sure, I'm not really good at sharing screen. I'm gonna try this and see. So give me a thumbs up if you can see this, Jan. Thank you, perfect, okay. So here at Highland, we have really been focused on becoming an AVID site of distinction by implementing AVID strategies school-wide. So school-wide, what we're doing based on our data is we started with organizational strategies last year, teaching students how to organize their learning, how to organize their materials, how to, even as basic as how to turn assignments in, okay? So that they had those skills. We've moved this year into focused note-taking, so we're focusing on writing and teaching students how to take notes and then how to use those notes to deepen their learning. So we're through phase 1 and phase 2. Working on into phase 3. And that's going on in every classroom at Highland, including our PE classrooms. So students they know that that's an expectation that's being reinforced in every classroom. They're learning to take responsibility for their own learning. We are also implementing collaborative structures. So that is to address our students' inability, especially our MLL students, to speak to their learning and to use language to further their learning. In every classroom, there are sentence stems that students can access so that they know how to start their spoken response, and academic language. So we're looking at making sure that students use that academic language when they're speaking about their learning. And as we go in and do classroom observations, we are not only looking at the class as a whole, but we're looking specifically at our MLL learners and then giving feedback to the teachers on how their MLL learners are accessing those collaborative structures, participating in those collaborative structures, their use of academic language, so that teachers have some very targeted observation feedback on the MLL learners. Okay? The other thing that we are doing is in our collaborative team meetings, so these are teacher teams, they have developed bi-monthly common formative assessments so that they've got data to inform their instruction. That data is disaggregated by target groups, and one of those target groups is MLL. And then teachers can purposely plan instruction and reteaching based on the data. And then moving on to right now, what we're working on is our MLL teacher is working to support students in learning and using the strategies in the MLL class. So they're looking at their notes, they're processing their notes, they're adding to, revising their notes in the MLL classroom. And right now, our MLL teacher is working to align the WIDA can-do descriptors to the proficiency level descriptors that we have on our curriculum guides so that he can better support teachers as they're working with the MLL students and what level they're at and what supports they're going to need to get to the next level. So that's kind of what we're doing here at Highland. Like I said, it's short and sweet. Certainly doesn't rise to the level, but that's what we're doing here, and we're just excited that our MLL students are making progress. Oh, and I'm passing the baton on to Ross. So take it away, Ross.
Thank you so much.
Terry, you're going to want to stop sharing your screen.
I will do that right now. I think I just need to know how to do that. I'll stop the share right there. Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Again, Ross Lunsford, principal at Mound Fort junior high here in Ogden. I've enjoyed listening to the previous strategies and that, and it's nice to see and hear that there's some similar things going on with these great strategies. So for us at Mount Fort, when we were looking at our ELL learners, we really kind of decided to take kind of a twofold approach to it. The first one was working on our assessment and our assessment just strategies. As far as we found, a lot of kids were not motivated to take the test. They didn't care about it. So we worked on trying to build some motivation with our students on that. And a lot of that goes into similar to what we saw with Farnsworth Elementary, I believe it was. We had the teachers sit down and review previous year's WIDA scores with the students, and did some goal setting with them on that to add to that motivation level with our students on it. And then we also knew that we needed to strengthen just their assessment strategies. As was mentioned before, as far as giving them practice with things, because we saw that we were low on the speaking, we were low on the listening in our levels. And so we had them practice, and they had assignments with speaking into the microphone, answering questions, same with listening to stories and answering questions from there, just to strengthen those assessment strategies with our students. The second part was really strengthening our teachers and their level to be able to affect our students' outcomes and our achievements. As our leadership team had gone into classes and observed, really our teachers were doing the bulk of the work, right? They're doing all of the talking, they're doing all of the work. So we've been working on improving the use of our students' academic language. As similar with Highland, we focused on some structured AB partner talk. We had many professional development sessions dealing with how to use how to have students use sentence stems in doing the partner talk on it, and really kind of formalized in it where we're using full sentences and with that. And so really we've just really had that focus reviewing and having teachers practice these strategies in our professional developments last year and this year. And as we go into our classrooms, that's one of our focuses that we're observing for and giving feedback on with our teachers. And so this year we've continued focusing with that, and we're implementing our habits of discussion to help deepen and strengthen our students' academic language. So we're just, some of those habits: speak as a professional, listen as a professional, elaborating on your answer, evaluating other people's responses, acknowledging and building off of other answers, to really have that rich classroom discussion and really have the students doing the work versus our teachers doing all of the thinking with that. So that's where our focus has been with our PD. We've really tried to keep it really kind of tight and keep the scope narrow with that. So that's where we've been at the Fort. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Steve from Ben Lomond.
To me, normally I know that I think it was Jared at West said that he doesn't like to take credit for people doing all the work. That's not like me at all. I usually like to take all the credit for work that I'm not doing. But we know that we're so thankful at Ben Lomond for Ross and Terry and the foundation they're giving our MLL kids as they come to Ben Lomond, and to JM and Thais and their whole crew at our Equity and Access team have just really provided the support that our kids have needed. But I'm going to be passing the time to Dave Thomas Smith, who's assistant principal here at Ben Lomond, who oversees this department, this program, and I'm so proud and so thankful for all of the work that she's put into this, as well as her teachers and her crew, and of course those amazing kids who are getting after it. So, Day Thomas Smith.
Thanks, Steve. So like Steve said, my name is Day. I would love to say that we can take credit as administrators, but let's be honest, we get to see the hard work of other people. So I'm also grateful for Terry and for Ross. They're our two feeder junior highs. And so what they do with their students is really the credit that we're getting right now. I look at what our 10th graders are doing. Those were the 9th graders at Mount Fort and Highland last year. And so I could speak to what we have done in the past. I think that Ross and Terry have done a fantastic job of doing that. So I would like to speak more, frankly, kind of changed my goal here of what our future goals are for our MLL students. We feel like we have a lot in place in terms of our best practices with our efforts at Rigor, our AVID efforts with Wicker and the use of PSYOP strategies and braiding those things together. But I'll speak specifically to what we do at Ben Lomond that's a little bit different than our feeder schools, and then what we're looking at in the future. I think what we're most proud of right now is our partnerships in the building. We have an employee through the United Way who works here full time to help the needs of our economically disadvantaged students, but we've also brought her into our MLL program. 60% of our students identify as being Spanish speakers at home. However, roughly 14% of our students this year are technically identified as MLL students. We see our students as a much broader picture than that 14%. Just because they're mandated to be MLL students, that doesn't take out the other percentage of students who are Spanish at home. So we recognize that bilingualism is very important in our school. And so we try to bring all of those students under multiple umbrellas. So Maria, our United Way employee, is bilingual. And so she works with our MLL students specifically. She has sort of a caseload of students with whom she works. So those students are identified as families who are economically disadvantaged and might need a little extra help. So she has a caseload of students that she checks in on during her time during the day. She keeps track of their data and their responsiveness in classes and creates those relationships in another way that our teachers and our staff members can't necessarily do. We also have a student who is actually a Ben Lomond graduate and was a Ben Lomond MLL student who's now in college at Weber State. And Paul works for us in the same capacity. He has a cadre of students with whom he works and he tracks, and it's been amazing to watch Paul's ability to connect with our students. He, I think, connects in a way that some of us can't for sundry reasons. He will call kids out on the reasons that they feel they can't perform and gives them the confidence to do that. So honestly, if I were to look at Paul's data, that would be the thing that I would like to share with you the most. It's amazing the power of a single person. And I'm grateful that at Ben Lomond, we recognize the power of the individual and we bring that into the power of our whole here. I also can't speak highly enough about Ogden School District's relationship with Ogden Weber Technical College. A lot of our students leverage that ability. It's normal for our juniors and seniors specifically to have adjusted schedules that allow them to go to the technical college and complete programs, oftentimes many programs. A high rate of our students, whether they're MLL, Spanish speaking at home, or monolingual students, attend Ogden Technical College courses. And so that's been a partnership that we're really grateful for. We also have some work that we're doing in the school that we think is a little bit different. Glenn Moon, one of our other assistant principals, has a couple things that I think are noteworthy. Number one, he's been working really hard the last 2 years at increasing our efforts with the seal of biliteracy here. A couple years ago, we had 0 students earning the seal of biliteracy. We found out about it. We started those efforts recognizing that seal of biliteracy probably should have existed for many of our students. And that was our failing as a building for not recognizing that those students had those skill sets and celebrating those. So our first year, I think we had 2 or 6, and last year we were up in the 20s, and we're on track to have even more than that. So my understanding is that we're one of the top schools in the region for students who are accomplishing the seal of biliteracy. And I'm grateful to Glenn for the work that he's done with that. It validates our students' successes that already exist in their lives, as opposed to, I think what often happens with an MLL student is that we acknowledge their progress in WIDA. We try and look at our kiddos with a range of data, and we think that one's a big one because we recognize that really will affect their lives after they leave us. We also have systems in place. We call it Credit Fest. So after school, Monday through Thursday until 5 o'clock, We have a series of employees who are up in our media center, and they're there for students to get any and all after school academic support and interventions. That could be with credit recovery, it can be with tier 1 instruction, it can be remediation, whatever the students are asking for. Our 2 MLL paraprofessionals are always in there, and so that is a help. And then we have another paraprofessional who works with another group of at-risk students. She's in there for help as well. Many of our MLL kids fall into that other category. So it's the relationship building, and I'm grateful for the work that they're doing, because we're seeing our students who are voluntarily taking that time to go and get additional help. And we all know as secondary buildings, it's difficult to find that time to really get kids in a one-on-one situation without pulling them out of an academic situation. And so we've done all that. We also have an advisory program. We're calling it Scots United this year. The teachers chose who's in their advisory. And so right off the bat, pardon me, we have buy-in and relationship building with the teacher and the student. We didn't give our teachers any designation of who they needed to choose other than choose kids. They may be students that they already had relationship with. They may be students that they don't know. Maybe they taught their siblings, we don't know. But that teacher is that go-to person for that student. That's a twofold program. If we are in a situation where we have to go into remote learning, you know that your teacher, your Scots United teacher, is your go-to person for anything that you might need. And at the same time, you see them every week, they're gonna check on you. They have their thumb on you to make sure you're making good decisions, communicate with families. So that's a school-wide umbrella, but it speaks to the relationship building that is important to us here at Ben Lomond. We, of course, like everybody else, use a lot of data in order to make decisions for our students. We have reading data, we use our WIDA data, we have district-based interim assessments that we use to check our students' proficiency over the course of the year. The one that I use the most here is a program called Panorama. Panorama allows me to see pretty much all of those things at once. And so in making our decisions for classes, I use all of that data to decide what we want to do with our students. So we have classes this year, for example, where students are in a mixed group of WIDA proficiencies. So not everyone is a level 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Sometimes we have some level 2s with some level 4s, but they're in a project-based learning class because they have some specific goals that they're going to work on with the teacher in that class who has a master's in multi-language learners, and I'm grateful for her. So those kids are in there based on need, whether that's some credit recovery, whether that's we find a weakness maybe in their science scores over the course of their academic education, maybe they need some extra reading intervention, and that can be done in that class. So it's really personalized. I think it might have been Greg, I'm not positive, who said that essentially their system looks like IEPs for MLL students. And we kind of consider it to be that sort of situation. Of our 148 MLL students, they each know what their goals are. Our teachers know what their goals are, and we can speak to those specifically with our student placement. I would also like to mention, in the midst of us receiving this award, one of the things I find noteworthy about our kiddos is that of our MLL students, this year, 21% of those students are also special education students. And so I think that speaks a lot to our students' hard work, that not only are they having to work through the challenges of being bilingual, but they're also working with the challenges of an intellectual disability usually. And I think that that just makes their accomplishments that much more amazing and noteworthy. So I'd like to also mention what our next steps are, the things that we're looking at going forward. I have some great ideas, and Salt Lake can expect some phone calls and emails from me. We are looking at increasing our performance with our seal of biliteracy. We're looking at changing some practices in terms of the way we teach foreign languages. So including Spanish for Spanish speakers, so that our MLL students who are already at least spoken language fluent in another language, and we're primarily Spanish here, have access to the reading and writing portion of their language so that we can move them into AP Spanish and up that scale so that they can be acknowledged for the gifts that they already have. So that will be interesting for us. We have some reserved time for one of our MLL teachers to do some site visits so that we can see what other teachers and schools are doing as best practices. I think we all are recognizing that we all have very similar things that we're doing for students. So obviously we're not all inventing the wheel, and it doesn't make sense for us to do so. So we're going to be doing some visits. We have some new ideas next year for recognizing students for their proficiencies and growth outside of the WIDA model, knowing that that will influence their WIDA outcomes. We're also going to look at MLL 12 different next year. It's especially difficult to get buy-in with seniors on their WIDA performance because they're about to get out of here. So we're switching our focus for MLL next year on college career readiness. And so MLL 12 will still be rooted in the standards of WIDA, but on things like resume building, writing letters to colleges, how do we communicate verbally with somebody in an interview, things of that nature. So functional skills that will serve them next year as they move on to whatever their goals are. So I think that kind of gives you a good idea of what Ogden does, keeping in mind that we're lucky as a smaller district that we all know each other quite well as leaders and as teachers. So we have a lot of collaboration opportunities that I think larger districts don't necessarily have. And so I'm really grateful to work in Ogden, and I've learned a tremendous amount being here, and I look forward to what we get to say next year when we're recognized again. Thanks so much.
Well, and thank you, everyone. As you can see, we have amazing talent in Ogden School District, and I'm just so privileged. Thais, Rhonda, all of us in Ogden District leadership, we're so privileged to have such amazing talent at our sites, and we know all of our children are in great hands, and we truly believe in Ogden, every student, every teacher, every day. So thank you.
So thanks, JM. Let me say a couple things and then I'll ask you, JM, to talk a little bit about a process that you use. JM and I, whenever we do monitoring in a classroom, which will, eventually start up again, we went to Backman Elementary and saw some really exceptional teaching there. She was, a peer reviewer with me on a monitoring visit. But one of the things I wanted to notice is what Martin Griggs in Park City said, which is what we actually did in Pasadena. At Pasadena High School, we had, Spanish for native speakers so that they could be literate in their own language. And then, like Park City, where it was Spanish 2, actually it wasn't Spanish 2 at Pasadena, but it's probably an equivalent. It was an AP class. So we had over 200, 300, 400 native Spanish speakers being prepared in literacy to pass the AP Spanish classes. So I would, suggest a really interesting approach that fits with your biliteracy seal. The other thing is, because the biliteracy seal, and the reason the Park City model I would really suggest you look at is that then the kids pass on and they go to the University of Utah DLI bridge courses. So I think that's really important. And those courses, which are interesting at the U, are all in Spanish, writing and reading and everything, as well as it gives them a feel, right, for what university life could be for them. And early on, it would be, sophomores as well. And so that brings me to the biliteracy seal, which is not used systematically as a leverage point, which you are doing. That rule, if you actually look at board rule, you don't have to wait to be a senior to get a biliteracy seal. You could actually get a biliteracy seal in 8th grade, which would actually make your transition to high school and all your advanced coursework much easier, right? Because then you'd be building on assets in a particular way. The other last thing I want to say is this whole idea about understanding receptive language, which is listening for a purpose and reading for a purpose. Listening has to be purposeful, and developing that skill. I was looking at data from one elementary school that's an exemplary school. Their listening scores were just all 6s. I mean, they have like 200 MLs, so multilingual learners. And then their comprehension scores obviously are off the charts. You see the point? The point that comprehension supporting a receptive skill is the same as reading. Now, if you're actually talking about what you're reading in dyads that Glendale does, or with other people that I've seen in rural communities, then writing for what they're talking about based on a text changes their literacy, right? So think really strategically about the way you would connect receptive skills as well as skills for production. Jam, I'm going to ask you one question. The self-assessment tool that districts use for funding for Title III, Jam, do you want to say a little bit about the way you use that to work with principals? Because it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, what we started doing is that we sent that out to everyone and asked our sites to do a self-assessment and then asked them to send that to us. And that's how we completed ours. And what we then did for this year, because it's COVID is just, everyone knows, it just exemplifies, magnifies everything that you have to do. What we did was we utilized the results from last year on the self-assessment tool, and then Thais and Rhonda and I integrated that in our site visits with each school at the very beginning of the year, in the summer and the beginning of the year, where we were looking at all of the compliance pieces, all of the elements. We even gave them data for our secondary schools on their enrollment the previous year and all their advanced courses and breakdown and all of that. So we incorporated that work in that site visit of where they had, as a district, we had identified ourselves, and then we just transferred that to this year and then personalized it for each one rather than asking them to do it one more time. But that's what we'd like to do, is at least every other year have them complete that self-assessment tool themselves and then personalize it the following year specifically in those site visits, and then reconnect another year. So that's our plan.
Yeah, that's really a great model for the way in which you engage principals in being more knowledgeable in relationship to setting goals. Because you can see this theme about setting goals, especially for individual students, and assets, really looking at assets. The other thing is Ogden, Dr. Rich Nye's great friend of mine and colleague, presented the way in which they're rethinking the way funding happens based on student learning needs instead of these really separate kind of programmatic issues that don't really support the personalized individual learning needs that we've heard throughout this conversation. So do you want to say anything about that, JM? It's even more than braiding, because I know Prova does a great job of braiding as well as Ogden, but there are some, kind of old, well, I won't say old because I'm old, but previous habits that end up mitigating against the way we think about funding. So do you want to say a little bit about Rich's approach?
Sure. What Rich's approach is in our district is that we go back to analyzing all of the different sorts of data that we collect. And we have a monitoring site visit, so I've just been capturing all the different levels. We have an enormous amount of data that we look at, and each site looks at that. But then what each site is encouraged to do with their executive directors, the anchor leads, the cabinet support, is then to break it down. What's the most the goals and the action steps that would make the biggest difference for our kids. Now, in order to make that happen, what do you need? Really, and nothing's off the table. You look at it. Okay, what's available in basic first? Then you look at title, then we look at TSSA, then we look at Title IIA, we look at land trust, all the different sources. And then as a district, we've identified some key things like for our MLLs and our ELs. One thing that has been so important, and the principals keep telling me, is our teacher specialist support from Thais and Rhonda is critical. So we maintain that support as a set aside. And then we maintain some support with some district liaisons. And we expanded that through a partnership. So we utilize partners as well. What can we build and grow and sustainable that partners can help us provide, like our United Way? Then I gotta say, ultimately, No, we do 3 cabinet site visits per year. We're just in the middle of the mid-year one, and nothing's off the table. Like just before Christmas, I sent out a request to all of our school sites that are designated TSI for EL learners. Look at your school plans. If there's additional needs that are not funded right now, let us know. Ross submitted a request and they'll all get their answers this week. And I braided funds literally, but that's what you have to do. You have to look at what's available, what can be put, what really isn't necessary anymore. Can I take that money from there and put it where it needs to go? So then we get the money in the hands of the folks that need it. And that's what our superintendent says. Like, we're planning our summer bridge and we're refining that. And he said, do not let money be a barrier. You decide as a district and as a team and as sites, what do our kids need? What's the best that they need to make them most successful? And we'll find a way to make it happen. And we'll utilize every dime we have to make that happen. Ross, Steve, Day, or Terry, if you're still on, do you want to add anything to that real quickly?
So Day actually put something in that maybe she could say, because I think that piece is really important, because there ends up being this whole issue about multiple plans and all of that kind of stuff. So Day, do you want to say a little bit about what you said in your chat?
Yeah, I would be happy to. You mentioned Pasadena. I'd like to throw out there that I'm a La Cañada girl. So I'm just going to mention that my prom date was from Pasadena High School. So I think one of the things that was an adjustment for me when I started administration in Ogden was that I came from out of state, and it was there was a separation between district and administration, or administration and teachers. And so it's been adjustment for me to have JM say, well, wait, what can I do for you? I feel like our cabinet is very much in service to us instead of the other way around, where we just have to report what we do. And so there have been a number of times when we've thrown out an idea or we've been exploring something, and JM's response has always been to ask us some effective questions for us to think about whether or not we're covering all of our bases. We like to use Noster's model a lot to make sure that whatever our plan is comprehensive and prepared for success. But JM oftentimes has said, let me look into whether or not I can pay for that. So I don't have to ask for money. JM, I feel like, is finding ways that she can support us. So I don't have to beg for anything. I know that JM is going to come explicitly with the purpose of supporting us and our goals for our students. And so I think that planning has been a lot easier, because we don't feel like we're always working with under some constraints that prevent us from moving forward.
Yeah, so thanks, Day. A La Cañada girl, I won't say much about that.
My parents taught in Sunland, Tahunga, if that means anything.
Okay, well, that's better.
I'm not a La Cañada girl. I just was born and raised there.
Those are inside jokes, so sorry, everybody. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up, but I think what I want to end up with before we go to Michelle, because Michelle Eldridge from Provo, Michelle and the work that they do ends up being like the master. I use the gender specific genius around weighted allocations for English learners, and the fact, again, that most people make assumptions about. Immigrant funding is given to certain districts based on their percentage of significant increase. Provo actually is now on the list with Alpine. So it's like Granite, Canyons, Alpine, maybe Alpine's first now. So most people in the state don't really know that. And the kind of work that's being done by Annalise and Michelle is just really brilliant. With all of the work that JM is doing, Charlene is doing, Salt Lake is doing, Park City is doing, all the innovation is Utah innovation, right? It's like what we're doing. And that's why these forums are important for learning from each other. So Michelle, take it away. It's your turn.
Okay, thanks, Christelle. You used a lot of adjectives there that I don't think really totally fit me, but the full truth. I would not call myself a master of anything. Maybe the more Diet Cokes during the day lately.
Okay, no self-deprecating is allowed. No self-deprecation is allowed in this forum, so.
Okay. Well, Christelle just asked me to share what we're looking at for summer school right now, given the current circumstances of COVID. So I will be pretty brief. We're in the beginning stages of planning right now. What we've started with, quite frankly, is looking at what we've done in the past. And as I'm sure you all have summer type school programs, we have offered those things through 21st Century grants, different other Boys and Girls Club grants, obviously federal program funding. And generally all agree, know all of us here, that evidence behind summer school is not super strong. We know reading loss is our biggest scary thing, especially in elementary, and then typically credit recovery in secondary. And with summer school not being compulsory, it adds a whole nother level of how much can you really do to close a gap when really it's not compulsory. So we've been looking at successful things we've run in the past based on data we've collected as far as attendance, what parents need. So really we're just in the early stages of designing something a little bit new this summer. We're working with our local Boys and Girls Club, with our rec department here locally, to provide some motivational experiences for families and students who attend. We're also looking at typically our social services, our food pantries, our social workers, our social emotional learning curriculum support services. All those things kind of in the summer tend to get much smaller. They're not non-existent, but they certainly slow down with students not in the buildings. And we're looking to keep those much stronger this summer. So I guess just in brief summary, our elementary is looking like in Provo right now, we go to school Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 1:40-ish. And we've decided one of the obstacles we know our parents have is daycare and babysitting. So we're going to try to keep our program for summer the same. So it will still go 8:30 to 1:30. So assuming they have school life figured out, they can continue with that through June. So that's one obstacle we're hoping to not have be in our way as much. Of course, we'll have breakfast, lunch, snack, transportation. But again, we're really strengthening our summer social services piece. For EL specifically, we are personally inviting through social workers and family liaisons, and personally inviting through principals and teachers, making phone calls to parents to scholarship invite their family, their students to participate. Our morning will look very similar academically. We're really hoping just to keep the work going instead of looking at something totally new for summer. And then our afternoon will be providing a lot of enrichment. So we're looking at about a 2-hour block with teachers teaching. We're providing some nice summer stipends for teachers. And then we actually are going to continue our ELD classes, ELD supports, and then those that don't, our interventions will look the same. And then our afternoon, we're looking at building a pretty robust enrichment program. So lots of music, PE, we're bringing in a soccer program, we're bringing in some great multicultural experiences through our diversity and equity department. So that's we're trying to have that kind of be our hook of summer school is going to be really fun. You want to come, and then have that be sort of our elementary version. Secondary, we're focusing on our, for EL, our juniors and seniors with some pre-AP work, credit recovery, and then truthfully, our social services, our needs socially and emotionally for our kids at this time, as I'm sure all of you are pretty significant. So we're putting a lot of our energy into that and just continuing our current academic summer program. So Christelle, I don't know if you want me to talk about anything else, but there we go.
That's fine. I think the other issue is interesting because we have one of the themes has been this idea of pre-AP. So during the summer, Park City has an amazing program, Dream Big. there's a partnership with USU. Ogden, they presented on the actual results of their summer school and the way they graded funding. So this whole issue of, what the needs are goes back to a needs assessment in relationship to the community instead of kind of what we typically think about. So that piece is incredibly important. The other thing that I think is really critical that we've heard throughout is the use of data. Now, when you look and you select data, the question always is, how do I learn who the learners are? Which includes family visits. And you've heard throughout the whole conversation about family engagement, about parent connection, about community. And the big thing, again, is this idea about what does collective efficacy look like, not only in the classroom, the district, but through partnerships, right? I think Utah is a really great example of leveraging these really innovative partnerships with all kinds of organizations that are really committed to the kind of support and enrichment that creates a learning environment for our communities and individual communities related to their cultural needs, right? So if anyone would like to ask, I'm not going to put you on the spot, Michelle, but if anyone would like to ask Michelle a question, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Provo's I think it was Spring Creek, right? They were a distinguished Title I school. And the principal there is like an incredible rock star. So if there's anyone who'd like to ask a question of Michelle, feel free. Otherwise, we'll actually go, I think, to Megan, who will do updates for WIDA.
Yep, absolutely. Let me share my screen. So as I'm getting my computer all set, if y'all need to take a quick stand up and stretch break, please do.
Anyone wants to ask Michelle a question? It seems like somebody from Ogden is saying, I'm stealing the idea of bringing in city recreation. So thanks, Michelle, for offering that.
Yeah, we hope that's a good partnership. Well, it's looking like it's going to be a great partnership, I should say. We're in the early stages of it. We know our rec center here is a big hub in the middle of town, and the kids love it, of all ages. So we're hoping to use that as a motivational tool. So,
well, then you'll let us know, right? You'll keep track and let us know how it works out. That's the whole goal,
yeah,
right? Is to leverage all these, partnerships in relationship to supporting a summer bridge, especially in ensuring equitable access to early college coursework. I'm just going to keep on saying that until you decide to shoot me, but I'm going to keep on saying the same thing over and over again. Okay, Megan.
Thanks so much, Christelle. Okay, I have to start with listening to all these amazing presentations. It makes me a little envious that I don't have my own school that I can just brag about and boast about, but I'm happy to be at the state level and just say, we have all these schools to brag about and boast about. So thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing and for sharing just this wealth of knowledge. It's just incredible. And especially during this just incredibly challenging year. So thank you. So today, Anne Michelle and I are going to kind of tag team. I'm going to start us off with just our general WIDA assessment updates, talk through a couple of challenging obstacles that schools are and LEAs are experiencing, and then Anne Michelle is going to kick it off with the new revised, refreshed ELD standards. So here we go. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Yes. Awesome. I'm getting thumbs up. Thanks so much. All right. So one thing I'm really pleased to announce before we even get into this presentation is I was actually just contacted by WIDA in DRC yesterday, and they wanted to share exciting news that Utah is leading the way so far in testing across the the consortium. And one district in particular has just blown all districts across the country and throughout the consortium away. And that great honor and recognition goes to Granite School District. So yes, I know, I was so excited. I was like, really? Yes. So while things are especially challenging, our state has done an incredible job, and it really is because of you all. By just doing everything we can to give these students the opportunities to be tested, and just blowing like everyone else out of the water. So I'm so happy. Utah's testing numbers are way up across the board. Granite in particular was at the very top of the list across the nation for our consortium. So well done, keep up the good work. Granite, I'm sorry that I'm gonna volunteer you, but I would suggest if you're encountering any challenges or struggles, reach out to Granite and find out what they're doing, okay? So with that, I love starting us off on good news. Some other great opportunities to please consider yourselves and also share with all of your amazing educators that you have just been presenting on. WIDA does have a development opportunity. If you have further questions, you will need to contact WIDA about this. In the email I sent this morning, there is a flyer with far more information. But if you would like to participate in developing the WIDA Access Test, because they're constantly developing new items and stimulus and everything, if you would like to be a part of that process, please apply. I myself have done it a few times, and it is fascinating, and I learn so much. So I would just like to, give a little plug to this opportunity. It is all virtual, and people that participate do get reimbursed for their time through a stipend, but I'm not sure the amount of that stipend. So again, contact WIDA with all the information in that flyer if you have any questions. All right, and just a quick reminder, next week there is a WIDA Access webinar about just monitoring for test completion, something that would probably really help to let us know, hey, where are we at? I look at the numbers quite frequently too, but it's good to be able to know, hey, what kind of reports are available to me for knowing how many tests are started, what domains have been started, what tests have been finished, everything. And so this is a quick just Q&A webinar that WIDA is hosting to help you through that process and running those reports in AMS. If you would like, since I shared these slides, to join that, you can just click directly on that link and it'll take you straight to that meeting. All right, so I'm so happy to say we are in our testing window. We have completed 3 weeks so far of our access testing, and knock on wood, I have not heard of any major fires that need to be put out. So I hope it continues that way, and I hope that we can be this shining example of getting tests rolled out and done across the nation. So we are in our testing window, and I am noticing on my slide right away, there is an error. And I thought I fixed this, but I probably did not press save. So everyone take huge note, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now, that our window has been extended to the 19th. It's not the 5th anymore. The window, we extended our testing window by 2 weeks to allow more ample opportunity for everyone to complete their testing. It is the 19th. So I'm putting that in the chat. Right now. Doesn't matter how many times I look at a slide deck, and there's always an error. Let's see. So everything, since we have pushed out that deadline, everything and all the other dates are correct on this slide. So again, many apologies. Everything has been pushed out a further 2 weeks. Some things are still to be determined, though. Some of those dates, actually getting things printed and shipped out, or further data validations. These are the dates DRC has given us that we're pretty sure and we feel comfortable about sharing. Some dates, though,
as they trickle in, we'll share those with you with any updates that we're getting.
Megan, can I ask a quick question about dates?
Absolutely.
I know this year we're really making sure we're tracking students who are home study students or students who were not able to come in and take the test. And I know we need to put that in the DRC as did not take. Is there a date? Does doing that coincide with the, go back to that slide. Sorry, obviously you're going to talk about it probably. When do we have to have that little box marked? Is that part of the reporting data validation, or is that like by the close of the window? Like when do I need to make sure that is done is what I'm asking.
Yep. Great question. So when do you have to have do not score codes entered into AMS? Yeah. You need to have that done. Your very last day is going to be 4/12/21. So
okay. Is that
even after the test, yep, great question. Even after the test window closes, you can still go in and make those adjustments. That final window for our pre-reporting data validation that you all do, that is where you can go in and catch any that you may have missed during testing as well, but anytime. Great question, thank you. And as always, I know you guys are probably used to my presentation style. I love that Michelle just jumped on in. If you have questions, put them in the chat. Feel free to come off of mute anytime. All right. Okay, just a couple of reminders from common questions I've been getting. Please remember in AMS, students cannot be deleted out of AMS. So they can be added in. When you add them, most of you are used to this. Just remember that when we put in their student ID number, we do the 3 zeros preceding their state student ID number. Deleted, we will delete students at the end during our state data validation. That way we can just, look at all enrollments and just make sure everything is good to go. And just remember that WIDA is a one-time upload. It is not nightly like our other tests in the state. So if you have students enroll at any time after that initial upload, you'll have to manually enter them, okay? Another reminder about kindergarten, I feel like a broken record when I say this, but bubble, 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 please, no checks, no lines, because the tests cannot be scored if they are not correctly bubbled in. And in order to fix that error, if you do check marks or lines instead of bubbles, it's $300 per test to pull them and transfer that information and rescore them. It's a costly mistake. So make sure that your test administrators, especially on those kinder tests, know bubble. All right, so would you clarify the date we should electronic test results? Let me go back. Electronic, we should expect earlier, around 4/29, definitely by the 13th though. But again,
Megan,
yes.
Yeah, this is Michelle. Can you confirm that that is the date that WIDA is expecting, or WIDA has messaged with us some that reporting may be delayed because of testing windows being extended throughout the country. Is this a concrete date, or is it an anticipated date?
The ones that they have posted, and thank you. I'm seeing
Jenny,
obviously my date errors. Let's just go straight to the page and see, because that is what WIDA has committed to and DRC has committed to. So that's a great question, Aunt Michelle.
Jenny Cross has the link in the chat.
Okay, so right here, let me see. Yes, you guys, I apologize. Goodness, this is what happens when dates change and my calendar mind isn't keeping up. I would love to say I would like to blame my little baby girl who's not sleeping at night, but this is all on me. So please trust these dates that we are seeing on our website that has been linked by, thank you everyone helping me out in this calendar struggle. These are the correct dates. Any questions about that? Okay. Many apologies for all the confusion. I will send out an email right after this to clarify and make sure that everyone is set, just in case some people have not been able to join us, so there is no confusion. Thank you all for helping me through this. Oh, all right. Additional materials, a very common question I've been getting quite frequently this year. Please remember that the initial material order was placed by the state for you based on that pre-ID upload. If you need any more materials, you have to use that additional materials tab. It's a little wonky. It seems a little weird because you see materials ordering tab and you would think, oh, I have to order there, but it's actually a tab that says additional materials. So please make sure that you do that. And WIDA and DRC would really like to encourage and request that when LEAs are requesting additional materials, please do it at the district level and not at individual school levels. All right, gonna give us a minute just in case questions. Okay.
Hi, this is Brenda Whitehorse with San Juan.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi. My question is, with so many of our schools not being in-person school right now, and more parents wanting to opt out of testing, is that a possibility for them?
Brenda, thank you so much for that beautiful segue, because that's where we're heading right now. So let's talk about all of these unique challenges and what do we do? So access testing in COVID-19. So as we know, the WIDA access was removed last year from the parental exclusion or opt-out form. And the State Department, the feds, they have come out and they just recently issued an updated guidance saying that the test has to still be given annually. They have pretty much said, even we're not going to be giving waivers for test administration. Okay. So there really is no exemption for the requirement to give the test this, the window that we're in right now. Now the fact sheet that's linked on here is the old one, but last week we just got new guidance. I know you probably have been sent it several times. I also linked the updated amended fact sheet to the email this morning saying, hey, listen, the test needs to happen per federal guidance and guidelines. However, what do we do now? Right? We're in a very unique situation. So we have a lot, just like Brenda said, we have a ton of students that are learning remotely, right? They're at home, they're virtual learners, they're remote learners. And parents are feeling very, very hesitant to bring their child in for testing, right? That's why they're at home learning. So this is kind of a little bit of a tricky dance that we have to do. And hopefully this is going to help you all navigate this. So state statute does prevent schools from encouraging parents to opt out of testing. That doesn't mean you can't talk about it, right? And really, truly, I think it's important for us to know we can't sit here and pressure parents to bring their kids in for testing. Parents will always have the ultimate right to make those decisions for their kiddos, and we shouldn't be pressuring them. So if parents, ask, I would like to opt my students out of the test, what do I do? Give them all the information. We're just saying don't don't sit there and, say, hey, everybody, we really think everyone should be opting out of the test, because that's not the right thing. So you can have these conversations, but you cannot be encouraging it, right? You can't just be the one saying, hey, let's all opt out of testing. So,
Megan, I just need to say one thing that's really important. The reason WIDA was taken off the parental opt-out list was because it's a federal guideline and law that obligates us to actually ensure that every single English learner, students learning English, is monitored and tracked specifically for that skill, those skills, right?
Exactly.
So that's actually the point. I actually know that when parents, are hesitant about labeling a child as a multilingual learner or needing to learn English, there are really great approaches. Weber School District is an example of actually supporting the parents in seeing the benefits of monitoring the students, so the students can actually set their own goals. And that data, individual data report that's on the website is a really good tool to show parents and say, look, this is the information that we get, and look at all the things your students can do, and look at the goals set for him and the way we monitor and support his or her education, right? Because we're committed to every single individual student. This is one way that helps us ensure quality education for your child. I mean, there are ways that you can do this in a really strategic and loving and kind way for parents. So I'm just saying, this is actually an opportunity to think differently. And Brenda, I realize the situation on the reservation, and I know that's really challenging because of distances as well.
Right. And so to echo what Christelle said, really this test is a student's civil right. This is to ensure equitable access to their academic English learning, right? And so we have some recommendations of what you can do, because ultimately it's going to be on you, the LEAs, to make sure that you are providing the opportunity for testing, so you're not infringing on the student's civil rights. So the first thing that we recommend and suggest that you do is talk to the parents and guardians. Just explain the importance of this testing, like Christelle just did, how it can help their child, and that it really is their civil right. This is the rights of the parents and the students to ensure equitable access. These test scores are really their checks and balances against us, the school, right? And the educators. And so we don't want them to not have those tools to be checking that their students are receiving an equitable education. Also, it would be really important to reassure the parents about all the safety precautions that you are taking and how you are following your local health department guidelines. So now, in certain situations, and Brenda, I know that we have a separate meeting plan to help you work through it. If you have certain areas where your school is in lockdown, those local health guidelines have to be followed first and foremost, right? So if you have unique situations such as Brenda, where portions of where their schools are, it's in lockdown. Schools are not open, not optional. They require family, like interactions, to be with immediate family members only. So interacting with the tester is not going to be an option. You do need to follow those guidelines first and foremost. And so when those difficult situations arise, I'm going to let you know how to document this in AMS as well. But again, our second recommendation is to document, because it's not fair for you in a pandemic to be held liable and say, hey, we made every opportunity for this kid to come test, and their parents refused, and we're possibly going to be cited by the Department of Justice or Office of Civil Rights. That's not okay, and that's not fair. So what can we do to ensure that you have everything you need so you don't find yourself in that situation? Make sure that you're documenting all the dates and the attempts to contact the parents and the guardians. And we really suggest that this contact, it doesn't always have to just be by email. Please send letters home if you can in their, primary language, that you're making the effort. If you're just only communicating in English, that's not the opportunity. They're probably not understanding the opportunity. So please, use the resources available to you, that to make sure that you're communicating the opportunities in all languages and in multiple methods. So letters home, calls home, emails when necessary, try various routes. Also make sure that you're keeping track of the content of what those conversations, looked like. Keep the records in the student's CUME or ELP files. So whichever your school and LEA uses. So, and also just copies of all written communications and everything. Because again, the most important thing is that you are showing that you are providing a safe and equitable opportunity for students to test, okay? And Anne Michelle's making a great point. So again, the fact sheet that we attached, I think there are many, many great talking points on there that you could use with parents as well. I will tell you, I've had more parents call me this year than I've ever had. And once they understand, just the implications behind the testing and what it truly does for their students, they're all on board and they're like, you know what, this is worth bringing my student in to test for. So also, another talking point, we've talked a lot about the seal of biliteracy. Hey, this is a test that shows English proficiency, which is one of the requirements. They can use this test to eventually apply for that. So letting them know, like, this shows that they are an excellent multilingual student. So, and if you ever have any questions about, talking points or anything, please contact us, myself, and Michelle, Christelle. We're happy to walk you through any of these conversations because they're a little difficult. And reassuring them that, hey, again, federal law states that we can never, ever use any of this information to determine citizenship, immigration status, or anything like that. And we still very much so have that era of fear, aside from the pandemic, lingering over it. So many challenges. But what do you do if they still refuse? Aside from keeping all that documentation, we want to put in place one more step to provide additional documentation for you all. So in the past, if there is refusal still, you would, or students are absent. Just say a student is chronically absent, never here, and no matter what you did, you just couldn't get the student tested. So you do in AMS, you go to the Do Not Score tab for that student, and then you'll have to choose which code to use for each domain. So here we see that it says absent, invalidate, declined, deferred special education. The ones in the state that we pretty much use here are absent, invalidate, and declined, and mainly absent and declined. Invalidate is typically for those rare instances where we see cheating happen, okay? But so if a student is absent or if they decline, they refuse to test, whether it's the parent or the student, because guess what? We have situations where, I know, shocker, some kids just sit back on a test and they refuse to engage with it. And there's nothing we can do. We can't make them press the buttons, right? So we would use that in those cases. So that's what you all are used to. The additional step that we are providing for extra documentation that the state can collect and you also now have is to put in actual do not score codes. And that is going to be just the next tab over where it says demographics. And then you're going to scroll down where it says state defined optional data, and you're going to put in one of two codes to show this is pandemic COVID related. They, you know, we did everything to provide the opportunity. We did provide a handout with all of these steps with more in-depth instruction as well. So please see that attachment as well. So what code would I put in there in that state defined optional data field? So refusal to test, if the student or parents refuse to bring their kids in because, hey, it's a pandemic, we're not doing this, then you're going to, again, choose the declined one, go over to that demographics tab, and you're going to use code 106, okay? If the student is just absent and you're not sure, you know, it's pandemic related, there was no documentation, anything like that, you know, if they are just absent and it's because they're remote learners due to the pandemic, then we're going to tell you to use code 107. So you're going to either use 106 or 107. Okay, so maybe the student's in quarantine, it's a health circumstance, or, you know, they cannot get to the school. So it's not refusal. The parents would love for it to maybe happen, but for some reason, which could be a plethora, they're just not coming. All right. And then, of course, our contact information. So if you guys have any questions moving forward with this, please let us know how we can help you. Just as Brenda has, she has set up separate meetings with me to discuss their unique circumstances. You all can do that as well. We're happy to help. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne Michelle for standards.
Thank you, Megan. I hope that was helpful in helping you to know how to navigate these different situations where students may decline or parents may decline, or if the student has a health circumstance such as they're in quarantine. So I am going to talk to you about the new WIDA ELD standards framework, which is very exciting. So as you know, the standards have not been updated since 2012. And there are some substantial changes, and I'm just going to highlight kind of what's the same and what's different, and point you to some resources where you can get some additional professional learning or find information for yourself. So the standards framework is a refresh from 2012. It reframes language around key uses and key functions. And so as WIDA has evolved and brought in the key uses into the can-do descriptors and language functions, these are now embedded in the standards. They provide annotated examples for every grade cluster, and I'm going to show you some of those. But I think one of the biggest changes is that they eliminate the model performance indicators. Those of you who are familiar with the 2012 standards might be as excited as I am to see the model performance indicators go and have something that's much more functional. And so the big ideas are equity of opportunity, integration of content and language, collaboration. But I think, like I said, the biggest change is this functional approach to language development, and that's going to be the biggest change that you're going to see in the new standards. So where can you get them? You can download them from the secure portal, or in this PowerPoint I've included a link that's from the resource library. You can order print editions. Right now they're in pre-order, but you get those through the WIDA store. There's also a short video that I've linked here that's just 3 minutes. A 3-minute introduction to the new standards. So first we'll talk about what's staying the same. The can-do philosophy is still in place. this is a link to the 12 key guiding principles. But that mission hasn't changed for WIDA, and the can-do philosophy really guides how these standards were developed. The 5 WIDA standard statements have not changed. They still cover social and instructional language, language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. There are still 6 levels of proficiency that align with the WIDA Access Assessment, and there are still 6 grade level clusters. If you look at these little kiddos, you can see that they have, you know, K1, then cluster for grades 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 10. Sorry, 9 through 12. What's different? And this is what's really exciting. So they've embedded the key language uses, the key uses that you've seen in the can-do descriptors. These are language families that cover across content areas, and it's really, really functional and nice to see that these key uses are really embedded in the standards in the form of narrate, argue, inform, and explain. Here's a really interesting feature of the new standards that I think is really fascinating. We did a survey of content standards consortium-wide, and they created these charts for each of the grade clusters that show what is most prominent, what is prominent, and what is present for each. So you have the standards listed, but then you have the key uses: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. So we're looking at first grade. Social and instructional language, it's highly likely that first graders are going to be narrating, informing, explaining, and engaging in argument. Inform also is used in all subjects, but the content standards indicate that, you know, narrating in mathematics for first graders is present but not prominent. Language for social studies, narrating in social studies is prominent but not the most prominent. So this is a really interesting way of how teachers can focus their instruction around the standards and the language use. So here's an example standard for grade 4 or 5 under argument. The language expectations are general, that students should generate questions. They can support or challenge opinions. They can clarify or elaborate on ideas based on feedback, etc. And they're very clear all throughout the new standards and formatted in this way. The second change is something that I'm really excited about, because this is a way I've been thinking about the domains of language for a long time, and so it's really neat to see the standards framed in this way, that they're focused around the 2 modes of communication: expressive and interpretive. I usually use the word receptive language, but writing and speaking are expressive forms, students generating language, and listening and reading are interpretive forms or receptive forms. Students understanding language by what they intake, and then expressive is the kind of language they produce. So here's an example for grades 2, 3 under explain for math. You can see that they are divided into interpretive skills. They can identify a concept, they can analyze a plan for problem solving, and evaluate simple pattern structures. And then they have the expressive portion of explaining in math, where they introduce a concept, they describe a solution or the steps to solving a problem, or they can state reasoning used to generate a solution. So this is, again, how the standards have been reformatted around the skills of interpretive and expressive language within each grade span and within each of the key uses. So they're organized, the organization has changed. They're identified first by the content area. This is a language arts standard. And then it will tell you the grade level cluster. And then the key use, here it's narrate. And the mode of communication is expressive. So these are language expectations that create goals for content-driven language learning. That so you really are embedding language instruction within the content. The annotated lesson examples, there are keys to what each of these things mean, but here you can see the standard. This is a kindergarten narrative expressive example that the standard is to orient the audience to the story. So some samples are using the word brother and using nouns to group and introduce context. Over here is another standard, describe story events through verbs and through pronouns, and then you can identify how the student has used that. And here's the sample of the student's writing below. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a very functional approach to how to apply the standards in the classroom, and moving away from writing model performance indicators. The proficiency level descriptors still exist, as they did in the 2012 edition, but they are focused on that interpretive and expressive language. So this then shows you the word level, the sentence level, and the discourse level across each level of proficiency and each content area. And it tells you what students should be able to do. They're like can-do descriptors that are broad and general for what students can do when they are at the end of level 1, at the end of level 2. So they really are very helpful in setting goals. If a student is a 2.1, for example, you know exactly where you're going or what the student needs to be able to do to reach the end of level 2. And so they're oriented to sort of mastery at the proficiency level. Professional learning opportunities. Before I go on, I just want to say the best thing you can do is to get your hands on the standards. Just become familiar with them, and you'll start to see how all of these things link together and how applicable they are in a school setting. So for you and for your teachers, the professional learning opportunities that WIDA is providing, there's a Q&A webinar series. There are 4 dates. The first one was 2 days ago, but they do archive these so that they can be viewed later on. But there are 2 dates coming up in February and one in March. They each have different topics. This link will take you to the description of each of the webinar content. They are adding an e-learning module workshop to all the e-learning that we already have available. It will be available February 15th. Again, this is for all educators in the state. They just need a WIDA account and can access that through the secure portal. Really excited about the e-learning workshop. And then here's a link to WIDA's supporting resources page on their website. So for you, next steps, download the guiding principles and maybe refresh those foundational concepts. And then, like I said, get your hands and dig into the standards themselves and engage in some of these professional learning opportunities where you can ask questions. They're well attended with educators from all across the consortium, and every time I am able to engage in these Q&A webinars, I learn so much. So here are links again for you to be able to download those standards. So that was a quick overview, but I want to give you some time to either ask questions or if you've been able to view the standards, they were released in December, January. If you've been able to share what your thoughts are about what you've seen, and I'd like to just give you some time to talk with each other as colleagues.
Okay, we only have time for any questions. And if we want to do more intensive work, then they'll let me know and we can do that with you and Michelle. So any questions? Okay, thanks so much. I just, and Michelle and Megan, and there's been this ongoing conversation about the biliteracy seal. And if anyone would like to, I think somebody from Davis, OD, do you want to say something in relationship to the biliteracy seal before we go to Claustina? Now, I really think if we're focusing on assets and family heritage language, right, as an asset and a benefit in relationship to further economic development and, you know, the way in which families are valued based on what they actually bring to the schools instead of thinking about, you know, them as those children or whatever, that we need to really focus on a biliteracy seal. And so, Odie, do you want to say something? Because we've been having this conversation with Martin and you about what you do to ensure that the biliteracy seal is available. We also did this with the Navajo reservation when there were some, when the requirement to be tested was like, you know, I don't know, go to the tribal leaders and, you know, something like that instead of doing it in our own community. So Odie, do you want to say something, or Martin?
For my part, no, great discussion. I think it's amazing hearing so many districts going that route. I'm happy to talk sometime if people want to collaborate with us. I'd love to hear what you're doing, particularly which assessments you use. I saw some in the chat, so thank you.
Thanks. And I also think that the University of Utah, the dual language immersion and the university credit is really important for all of us to focus on. This ends up creating the kind of equitable access that we're talking about to early college coursework when you're a sophomore. And if you look at the framework, you'll actually see that being assessed in your family language is, you know, a strong indicator of being ready for the kind of work that's being done at the University of Utah. I also know that there are districts, maybe Canyons and other places, like East High said, we're actually trying to develop, I think Granite's doing the same thing. We have all these, you know, over 100 languages. So why can't we get local people to be qualified to provide that kind of validation for a second or a third or a fourth language? I mean, there's no reason why we can't do that.
I just have a quick comment. This is Brenda from San Juan. So we get our testing through Navajo Nation for the bilingual seal, and the test complexity is pretty high. It's not based on just regular oral dialogue, but it's also based on a lot of knowledge that students have to have about the history of the people and certain things. And so I feel like it's pretty hard and challenging for our students to pass that test. And I've been communicating that with Navajo Nation, but I was wondering if there was another way to do the Navajo bilingual seal test, or if I have to go through the tribe.
Yeah, so we should talk, because the last person that I work with we ended up doing the Utah biliteracy seal for Navajo, which then used your local translator. So we can talk about that offline. But 3 years ago, I think we actually had 6 of your students earn the biliteracy seal, and it wasn't through the Navajo Nation. There's nothing. I mean, I'm not being critical of the, the Navajo Nation. I'm just saying, if we want to maintain Navajo as a spoken and literate language, then there's no reason why Utah's biliteracy seal focuses on the way in which we certify students who are speaking a family heritage language. So let's talk, Brenda. Okay, so now we're going to go to Claustina. It's wonderful to see you, Claustina. Just say a little bit about your background in relationship to now you're in Park City, an administrator, and the work that Access is doing.
Dr. Estrada, thank you for having me. As always, it's a pleasure to be in your midst, and a pleasure and honor to be in the midst of some of my esteemed colleagues that I see on the Zoom platform today. So just a little bit, I just got into the role as the current chairwoman of our Access Committee. I do want to give a shout out and pay respect to Rosanna Benally-Sag. She is our immediate past chairwoman. So thank you, Rosanna, for being here. A little bit about myself. Yes, I currently work for Park City School District. I'm a vice principal at our middle school, Ecker Hill Middle School, and I also facilitate our district's Equity, Access, and Opportunity Task Force. I started out when I moved from New York. I'm originally from New York. Shout out to the Big Apple State. I came to Utah, the great state of Utah, or Beehive State, in 2005, and I started working in Salt Lake District. I was first a special ed teacher at Highland Park, and then I moved over to Beacon Heights. From there, I went back to the University of Utah to pursue a master's in educational leadership and policy, and then a doctorate in educational leadership and policy. And so I've also worked at Northwest as an assistant principal, worked at our Salt Lake City School District district office, in our Equity and Access Department, and also in our Equity Department as an Equity Director and Equity Supervisor. And then now I'm in Park City. I've been here 3 years, and I just love this roller coaster of different things to do. And so for Access, on our Access Committee, we have members that represent many of our different BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color. And we also represent our different intersectionalities of social constructs, right? So we have representation and advocates for our LGBTQ community as well. And so on our Access Committee, we really represent many of our different school districts, and many of you that are on the line today, we have representation from those different school districts, including Salt Lake City School District, Canyon School District, Park City School District, Provo School District, and more. And so that's pretty much who we are. So thank you, Dr. Estrada, for allowing me to be able to come today. Do you have any questions for me?
So the biggest thing is, and I think I sent this out, the resolution, the anti-racist resolution that you all were working on in relationship to getting it through, well, getting it approved by the board. Mm-hmm. So just a little background, and then we'll be open to questions.
So as all of you know, as educators, we were really grappling last year in March when this pandemic hit us. And we always knew that we had inequities within our school districts, but we were not prepared for what we saw when we ended school for many of our districts on March 13th. And so our Access Board meets every month. And as we started to look at some of the experiences, the challenges we were experiencing, we thought, wow, these gaps are getting wider and wider. You know, we have students who don't have hotspots. They have no internet connection. They don't have devices. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, you know, how do we get our kids on a platform? You know, at the time, many schools were doing different things. Some were doing Zoom. Zoom was a taboo for some because there were people Zoom bombing. There's WebEx, Google Meets, right? There are many different platforms. And so we were struggling with getting students on the platform. We were struggling with parents knowing what their students were doing. And so those are just some of the challenges that we had. And so as an access committee, as advocates, as social justice leaders, we began the conversation, and really the resolution was quite organic. It just came about based on the needs that we had for our students and what we wanted to see in terms of opportunity and access for all students. So first of all, our committee basically generated a list of recommendations within like four board members, right, for their consideration. And then the first recommendation that we had addressed was addressed in the December USBE board meeting. And that was a resolution to denounce racism. Because what we realized is our students are marginalized. And when we look at the rich history of our United States, we would be remiss if we didn't look at how our nation came to be. And so, you know, as we looked at everything that unraveled within our nation, we realized that our schools were basically a microcosm of the macro, right? So for some of us who thought that we were living in a post-racialized society, we quickly came back to reality, realizing that our society is very racialized. And as Dr. Robin DiAngelo says, you know, we are not born to be socialized racially, right? We don't speak about race, right? That's a taboo for us. And so we saw all this stuff going on in the news, right? And things were extremely politicized. And so, you know, we saw the murder of George Floyd. We saw many, many different things. And so how do we help our students process? Even as adults, it's hard for a lot of us to process this, think about this, and have courageous conversations with our families, let alone with each other, right? So how do we engage our students and make sure our students are feeling safe, make sure our students are feeling okay with also processing all of this media, you know, social media that we are also processing. So that was basically our first recommendation. And then our second recommendation will be addressed in February. And that basically speaks to, you know, how do we have professional development for teachers and support teachers as they are trying to navigate this curriculum, right? This is our world as it is now. And as we show up as adults to our students, we have to be cognizant that we want to show up in our whole selves, but we want to be authentic. Right. And there are sometimes we might not say the correct thing, but that's where we're reflective and that's where we learn. Like Dr. Estrada, one thing that I heard you say a little earlier was when we talk about our kids, they are our kids. They are not those kids. Our families are our community, right? They are not that community or those people. They are our people. And so I think when we start to find commonalities with each other, we start to seek to understand, seek to be understood, and we take a reflective lens of how we ourselves engage in conversations within our schools when we are providing access and opportunity for students. That's where the work starts. That's really where the courageous work starts. And so that's really how our Access Committee came up with our resolution and came up with our recommendations. So.
Thanks, Claustina. I think it's really important, and I know the time issue is always a challenge, but I'm actually required, but you're not required, to attend board meetings and also committee meetings where these discussions are happening. And I think it's really important for you to hear the perspectives of board members, because they're the ones who actually set the policy for the state. So I'm really challenging you to better understand the kind of work that the Access Committee is trying to do to actually open up the hearts of people to create what we want Utah to really become. Right, which is a welcoming environment that's safe and loving for every single student as our students, right? Our families, our communities. So we're a little bit over. I'm going to send out the link to this, and Megan and Michelle, they've already sent out, I think, theirs. People are clamoring, Charlene, for your video. And so we'll talk more closely, and Brenda, I'll talk with you also about the way in which we ended up focusing on the Utah Biliteracy Seal. And also any presentations, Charlene, that you and Nathan are working on in relationship to supporting them is really important. I actually have some limitations, unfortunately, on what I can send out to people. I'm not going to go into that, but you can through me. So, that's a way that we think more strategically about how we become an authentic learning community together. Okay, so I just want you to know how much I'm, it's such a privilege and an honor to support the work that you're doing. And next year when we do recognitions, it'll be even more expansive because of the work you do in having, open-hearted conversations that are real with students, families, communities, because they're our future together. Okay, so thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, we'll see you.